い全国大会目指して頑張ってみたいかあの若い頃の気持ちを取り戻せたら良いのにもしよろしければ行きましょうか願いが叶う街にその時間楽しい年に行くもしかして知ってるのやのととすがり出会う嫌なものって答えそうかもしれない知りて素晴らしいものそれは救いの神道だ我々の忘れおいでこれは愛の告白願って忘れましょう成長の苦悩世界を恋になり雨のアウハウと叫んで気合い入れよう願いの願うの今日の今日のベケーション今日
Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation, an anime podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here to kick back, relax, and talk about some anime this week on the show. We are beginning our fourth part of our Kyoto Vacation, which is a part that is the shortest of all of ours. It's only going to be 2 episodes because there's absolutely nothing that is thematically connecting these shows. These shows have nothing in common whatsoever. They're just 2 really great shows that I wanted to cover. And they didn't fit in with anything else. So we're beginning part 4, My Ordinary Life is a Mystery to be Lived, featuring Nichijou and Hyoka. So today we are talking about Nichijou, also known as Nichijou My Ordinary Life, which is the English subtitle that Funimation gave it. And next week we'll be talking about Hyoka, which is a high school mystery show. Again, there's nothing in common between these, but they are both great, great shows. And today is a very special episode for me, Jonathan, because Nichijou is something I've loved for a very, very long time. I feel like I've brought it up on our Weekly Stuff podcast many times over the years as my favorite comedy thing basically ever. Certainly comedy TV show. That's more complicated if you try to expand it outside of just that sphere. But it is outrageously funny. It is incredibly ridiculous, absolutely bizarre. One of the most weird, insane shows for a variety of different reasons. And it is maybe the 4th or possibly 5th time I've watched the show all the way through. And it continues to make me laugh outrageously. And so I'm very, very excited to talk about it today. It is also one of like the most unusual shows for us to cover because we have never done anything like this. This is very much a gag skit-based kind of show. But I'm very excited to get into this and finally talk about what makes Nichijou so special and also so bizarre.
Yeah, this was on your top 10 of the decade when you did that. There's an episode of the Weekly Stuff podcast where Sean counted down his top... Actually, he counted down his top 50 anime of the decade. Yes. He didn't tell me he was going to do that, so I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs for like 3 hours. I mean, I learned a lot. It was great. But I think Nichijou was near the top, right?
Yes, it was maybe 2 or 3, I think.
Because Monogatari, the whole saga of that, was number 1.
Yes.
Maybe a future Japanimation Station season? Who knows?
Who knows?
But here we've got our Nichijou episode. Yeah, this is the weirdest fucking TV show I've ever seen. I don't even think there's competition. Like, I don't know. Twin Peaks: The Return, I think, is less bizarre than Nichijou is. It's maybe more like formally experimental, but Nichijou is just fucking weird. And I do love it for that. I don't want to disappoint anyone. I don't love it to the intensity you do, Sean. And I am glad you love it to that intensity. I think, and I think this is purely 100% a matter of taste. I have no, or very few criticisms of it on any kind of artistic level. I think it is pretty immaculate. Certainly on its production, it is immaculate. It's incredibly animated. And I think, the general, for a show that is this all over the map with its subject matter and the length of skits and all sorts of things, it's shockingly consistent in how good those are. I think to my taste in humor and in anime humor, I will say between the 2 comedies we've watched so far this season, I guess Haruhi's a comedy, but it's at weird. I don't know where we put Haruhi.
Yeah.
There are swaths of Haruhi that are not funny. So, but in terms of the two pure comedies, I prefer Lucky Star just to I think my taste to some of what it's doing was more interesting to me personally. But I still loved this, and I think it's a great show. I had a lot of fun with it. We both have a top 10 segments list that we're going to do. You've had, I guess, many viewings to think about yours, Sean. Mine was, oh God, I have 25 segments I want to include here. Let's whittle this down. So it is very dense with greatness. I just think and I can talk about some of my reasons later. Again, it's not 100% to my taste in comedy all the time. When it is, because there's a lot of variety here, I love it. And I think anyone would love parts of this show. And I am glad, Sean, you are someone who clearly is in love with every single inch of it, which is great.
Yeah, I think for me, because obviously, comedy is very, very, very subjective. And this is a comedy show,
Yes.
which is Lucky Star is also a comedy show, but in a very different kind of way. Lucky Star has narrative continuity that persists between episodes in very clear ways. Time passes for those characters, that they grow and change, not in huge ways, but in meaningful ways still. Nichijou is not quite like that. They inject a little bit more of that in the show than is even in the manga, with having stuff like they have Nano join the high school at the midway point and stuff like that. So there's a little tiny kernels of sort of narrative continuity, but that's very much on the fringes. This is a skit show.
Yes.
But it plays to my sense of humor, where I think some of the stuff that I find the most funny is when you take something and you play it super straight and dramatic and dial it up to 11. And it's usually whatever's very sort of bland, mundane, whatever it is. And you just crank that dial and crank that dial and crank that dial. And that is very much what Nichijou's sense of humor is. And, as epitomized by things like the, scene where Mio tries to do the high jump, and it just becomes this whole insane, long, massive sports montage. It's just ridiculous and insane, which is my favorite bit in the show. We'll get into all that later. But that sort of defines to me so much of the humor of Nichijou. But then that is sort of surrounded by this bizarre, weird ephemera that creates this sort of weird, almost dreamlike tone the show has at times, where it is just moving between large casts of characters, random different segments. There are so many weird one-off segments that exist that the show does and then drops and then moves on from and then brings back later and stuff like that. It is not even just an adaptation of Nichijou. It's technically an adaptation of two different manga, because you also have Helvetica Standard, which is fucking weird as shit. So yeah, it is all weird and kind of surreal. And then you have these big gags that go on that just are about slowly cranking that dial up and up and up until the entire solar system has been destroyed somehow. And I love it. I think it is incredibly funny. Obviously, it is also going to be super subjective to your tastes. But I think one thing that everyone can appreciate is the insane level of craft that goes into this show, because Nichijou is the best animated thing we have talked about so far. Although I think has the highest level of production on that level. It is fucking ridiculous how good this show looks in motion.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if I would go so far as to call it the best, but it is beautiful. This is one where I was so happy that I had the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray in the US is deeply out of print. So I just imported a UK copy, which is identical from everything I can tell to the US. It's just region B, but I have a region free player, so it's fine. And I'm glad I did that. There was one episode where I was over at my brother's house, and I didn't have my Blu-rays with me, and it wouldn't have mattered if I did, because he doesn't have a region-free player, but we wanted to watch one, so we turned it on Crunchyroll, and it looks fine. It's totally fine. Crunchyroll streaming quality is fine, but it is oh, this is night and day. This show, you kind of need that crazy high bit rate, because there's just often so much going on. The line work in the backgrounds and the colors are so fucking detailed. There is so much motion in so much of the series. This is one where I was consistently very happy to be watching it on Blu-ray. That definitely defines that KyoAni aspect.
Yes, because there are shots in the show that if you're watching it on streaming just turn into gobbledygook, because there's so many motion lines and things like that going on, that the compression algorithms can't really deal with. So yes, this is one. It's a shame that the English Blu-ray is out of print right now, but it is definitely one worth, if you can get your hands on it, worth the home media experience, because it looks pristine is how I describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got mine from Rare Waves, and it was less when I bought it. They have it for $30 over on Rare Waves right now, which is totally reasonable for a Blu-ray like this, but you can probably go on eBay and find it if you have a region-free player. And if you don't have a region-free player, you should invest in one, because they're great. But anyway, yeah, the delightful, wonderful show, and we will talk more about why we love it soon. But you've got an absolute avalanche of notes for us, Sean. So I want to hear the history of Nichijou. Is it as weird as the show itself?
It's actually not that weird, but it does have there's a particularly sort of like famous part about Nichijou, which we'll get to, that it was interesting for me to research like stuff around it, because there's stuff about the way this show is discussed in terms of its reception in the English language community that I think sort of misses some of the element of what's going on with this show. But yes, let's talk about where Nichijou comes from. So in terms of the manga, as is typical for basically every single mangaka we've discussed, and as like most mangaka in the 21st century, the creator of Nichijou Arai Keiichi started in the doujin scene. So, right, creating fan manga and stuff like that, selling that at Comiket, things like that. And he
was
began
it sex
selling
manga like Mio creates? Is Mio his self-insert?
No, I do not believe it was erotic manga. Maybe there was some of that, but it didn't seem like it when I was doing my research.
One of my favorite running jokes in the show, just for reference.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And yes, we'll get into all of those insane jokes. So he began selling doujin under the pen name Himalaya Irika, which means Himalayan dolphin, in 2003. If you want to know, it's like, that guy's always had that sense of humor, clearly, because that's the weirdest fucking pen name. His first officially published manga was a manga called Kazemachi, which means like Wind City, basically, which ran in the Kadokawa magazine Comic Flapper for 3 months from January to March 2006. And these are basically like one-off chapters, right? For people who don't know, manga, you often get these sort of like one-shots that sometimes you'll get multiple one-shots technically in a series, but it's not sort of like fully picked up for full serialization. But obviously the objective usually is to have it be picked up for serialization. And then that's why you often have, for like a lot of those big manga series, something like Kimetsu no Yaiba has a weird like proto Kimetsu, or like Jujutsu Kaisen 0 is basically what this is, where it's sort of a proto version of the series that was a one shot. So you had this series called Kazemachi that was like that. After finishing Kazemachi, that is when he started creating Nichijou, and Nichijou also began publication purely as a series of one-shots. It started in May 2006 in the Kadokawa Monthly Shonen Ace magazine, and so it was just a series of one-shots from May to October, but then after that, beginning of the November 2006 issue, Nichijou was officially picked up as one of their regularly serialized manga. Nichijou then continued its serialization for quite a long time. It serialized until December 2015, so obviously like multiple years after the end of the anime. At that point, it went on a long hiatus, and then Nichijou came back in 2021, in December 2021. It is still, there's new Nichijou coming out today. A very interesting element of Nichijou's style as a manga, if you haven't looked at it, is that it is a blend of sort of standard manga format in terms of paneling, and then 4-koma or 4-panel manga, like what we've talked about with like Lucky Star or K-On! And so it kind of moves fluidly between those different formats. For the most part, the Yuko side of the show with like Yuko, Mio, and Mai, that is typically the sort of standard format. And then the Nano stuff with her and Hakase and Sakamoto, that is typically 4-panel. Now, again, it's not always that clean of a split, but that's sort of generally how it goes. I didn't read the whole manga, but I did get through the first 2 volumes, so I kind of got a good sample of how that works. And then there are also a bunch of like one-off gags that are just a 1-4-koma strip. And you can tell watching the show, right, all the kind of Nichijou titled segments, those are either a 4-koma segment from Nano's side of the story, or they're the regular big Yuko stories. But then you have lots of those little like special titles like the Go and Sucker Club Part 1, and that would be normally a 4-koma strip kind of thing in the manga. So it's a very weird mishmash of those two different styles, which is one of the things that I think when you go to the anime creates a very different sort of tone. Something else that was going on is at the same time he was creating Nichijou, Arai was also creating a very surreal 4-koma manga series called Helvetica Standard. And that series was serialized in a New Type magazine, just as like a bunch of like mostly disconnected strips, right? Like the Helvetica Standard, as you see it in the anime, are adaptations of those 4-koma strips, and it's like a very different kind of bizarre, weird, surreal kind of manga that has absolutely no continuity or anything like that. And so when we watch Nichijou the anime, it really is a mix of mostly adapting Nichijou, but also pulling in these random Helvetica Standard bits from the Helvetica Standard manga. In terms of the...
I was unclear on Helvetica Standard just from looking it up online, because it actually seems parts of the English internet are unclear on this, whether it was like within the manga Nichijou or it was its own thing, so that makes more sense. So it was a separate manga over here,
yes,
and it's KyoAni that pulls them together and decides, let's put some Helvetica Standard in here too.
Yes, and from what I understand, there are some Helvetica Standard strips where Nichijou characters appear in those strips, but for the most part, they are separate things. They have the different art style, all that kind of stuff. So then in terms of the anime, I unfortunately couldn't find a lot of stuff in terms of interviews for, like, a lot of the interviews and stuff have not been kind of posted online that are, you know, in the magazines and stuff that were coming out around the time. So most of this is just sort of like general information, because I also couldn't get the fan book for this one. On March 12th, 2011, there was an OVA called Nichijou Episode 0, which came bundled with a special edition of the 6th volume of the manga, which that's a relatively common thing for how OVAs kind of have changed in the 21st century, where it becomes a thing that's sort of like a special bonus with a limited edition release of a manga volume. And so this was the first project created for the Nichijou anime by Kyoto Animation. It's all the same production staff, it's all the same people, but if you watch Nichijou Episode 0, and we'll talk about this, it effectively feels like a pilot episode for a TV show, because it is sort of like 80% of the way to what Nichijou is, but it hasn't sort of fully cemented exactly the kind of editing style and stuff like that the full show is into. And that's one of the reasons why it's like kind of like this weird special little project that they do before they start full production on the full anime series. So they then start making the full anime series. This airs for 26 episodes from April to September 2011 as a late night anime. And Nichijou features all the same kinds of promotion that that anime of this period enjoys, that we think of when we think of like Haruhi Keion. KyoAni treated this like any of their other shows we've talked about. So it had a promotional radio show called Nichijou no Radio, which ran for 46 episodes. There's 8 character song CDs, 5 drama CDs that released over the course of the show's broadcast. There's also a PSP game called Nichijou Uchujin, or Nichijou Alien, which was released on July 28th, 2011. I did not have time to go try to find an emulator version of this game, so I don't really know what the fuck the game is. I need to find some time to go check that out, because I have no idea. How do you make, what is the Nichijou video game?
I'm looking it up to see if I can figure out some things about it and tell people, because I had no idea. This is like one of the last series I would imagine getting a video game adaptation.
Yes, because I was not aware of it until yesterday when I was finishing up some of my notes. I'm like, wait, what?
The beginning, so on the Nichijou wiki, it says, so it's a PSP game developed by Vridge, published by Kadokawa. The game follows a visual novel style and is said to have about 300 different scenes and multiple endings in the entire game. There is a fan
that doesn't answer actually anything, because what does a visual novel of Nichijou, what the fuck does that mean?
You choose any main character on the map. There's a map of the world, and the characters are like little circles on it. It says the game starts at 9 a.m. and lasts until 4 p.m. For every character chosen, the time will move forward for 20 minutes. After you choose a character, a roulette will appear and determine which antenna will affect the scene. This goes on. There's a whole roulette system. Then you're voting for different scenarios based on temperature, hot, warm, or cool. There's a whole status screen that it looks like Sakamoto guides you through. And at the end, Starla will make it, the girl from like the dream sequences makes an evaluation. And then you get a rating on a 5-point scale, Ko, Otsu, Hei, Te, and Bo. And it's about whether you get Hanafuda cards or if you lose soldiers, and then you get a scene. It's incredibly elaborate. It's so fucking weird. Oh my god.
Yeah, I need to find some time and boot up my PSP emulator and find a ROM of this game because I need to play it. I need to know. Maybe this will be my 2024's 2011 video game at the end of the year. But anyways, yeah. So there's a PSP game. Use that information for what you will. But anyways, one of the most well-known things about the Nichijou anime, even in like the English community, this is talked about a lot, is that Nichijou did not sell well. Nichijou effectively bombed in terms of Blu-ray and DVD sales. So, and this was a huge surprise at the time. And you can find lots of articles published in April 2011 when the show started coming out and then the first volume started being released that KyoAni was off of such a huge high where they had, with multiple series in a row with Haruhi, Lucky Star, K-On, basically redefined what success looks like for a late night anime. And Nichijou severely underperforms based on those kinds of expectations, certainly, but really any expectations. It does not sell well. The first volume sold 2,620 Blu-rays and 924 DVDs in its first week. So altogether, like about 3,500 copies. And it was only the 27th best-selling anime Blu-ray of that week. It actually took me a while to find the specific numbers because it's low enough in the charts that you have to go find a more obscure website that goes to that low. So yeah, and just for like a reference point, the number one of that week when the first volume was released was the third volume of Madoka Magica, which that sold 51,840 copies. And that's your kind of like K-On style hit. Right? Nichijou is a far cry from that. Later volumes stay in this kind of range of sales of about 2,500 copies for the Blu-ray and sub 1,000 for the DVDs, but it drops a little bit each week as is typical for these. So in terms of its Blu-ray performance, it severely underperforms in, that kind of initial hit where for a late night anime, you're focusing your attention on its success based on that first week of sales with the premium limited edition volume releases with all the goodies and all that kind of stuff. One thing that's very interesting, though, that I did not know and had never seen discussed is that there's another kind of side to the story of Nichijou's reception, because Nichijou was a well-liked show. It's not like people thought it was bad. It obviously has like a huge level of craft and it had a lot of fans. It's just, we'll talk about this, about why I think it didn't sell well, but it's not the kind of show that exists in that space. It's not a typical late night anime. I mean, it's not a typical kind of anime in any way, shape, or form. But in terms of genre, it's not what you look at when you're looking at these kinds of series. But Nichijou did have a kind of a second life on broadcast TV. So likely due to the fact that Nichijou did not sell well, I couldn't find any sort of official sources that confirmed exactly why this decision was made, but you can just kind of read between the lines. That KyoAni and Kadokawa decided to basically shop out the show's rebroadcast rights to other networks and mainstream networks. And so the terrestrial television channel NHK, which is like, NBC basically, or CBS for Japan, it's like the fucking TV channel, picked up the rights to rebroadcast Nichijou. And they did something very fascinating, which is that they re-edited the show into a 13-episode season. I had never heard about any of this. So there's a 13-episode version of Nichijou that has skits from across the whole 26, and they kind of like made a condensed version of it, cutting out some bits that they thought would like not sort of play with a slightly younger audience, because this aired on the NHK Education TV or eTele channel, which is technically a kids channel, although from what I could read that it also has kind of had a streak of having some like more slightly surreal type shows, almost kind of equivalent to like SpongeBob SquarePants over here, where it's like you get that kind of kids show that also is fucking weird if you think about it for 2 seconds.
Or you watch it and you're a kid and you already know it's weird. Like,
yes,
yeah,
and you're like,
yeah.
This is weird. This is like going for sort of more surreal humor. And so Nichijou was edited into a show that they thought would be more palatable for that audience. It was rebroadcast on NHK Education TV, which is a terrestrial channel, right? So this is like, you have a TV, you can watch this show, which is not what it's like for late night anime. Late night animes, you have to have like very special channels in order to see those. And it aired on Saturday evenings from 6 to 6:30 from January to March 2012. And this is commonly now referred to as the eTele version. If you're looking this up online, that's kind of how it's talked about. And the rebroadcast of the show actually proved really popular. And so people really enjoyed watching it in this segment and watching this different version of it. And it won a poll where on the eTele, like NHK website, there was a spot that was basically like this sort of continuous link or whatever that you could go and say like, hey, here's vote for shows that you want to have broadcast again. And Nichijou was the first show ever to get enough votes in that thing on their website that it actually got broadcast again. So shortly after that initial run, it began airing again on eTelevision starting in June 2012. And then later in November, it was released as on DVD as a quote-unquote director's cut version, which is what they called it, which I find that amusing. And that is the first complete release of the quote-unquote complete release of the show, was this director's cut DVD set, because that came out almost over half a year before the Blu-ray set that has all the episodes in it came out in Japan. So there was like this weird second life of this show. I really wanted to find uploads of the eTelevision version just to see what the episodes were like, and I couldn't find anyone that had uploaded those online. Obviously, you could if you wanted to dig out some Blu-rays or DVDs and import them.
I did find a torrent that appears to have them. I'm showing 12 in the director's cut. Maybe it was different on the DVD, but it is specifically from a DVD rip. The torrent might be dead. It has one seater. Yes. Maybe we can do it, Sean. Maybe we can get it for you.
I think I found
too.
Yeah, I think I found what you're talking about, and it was dead. Although maybe someone will bring it back to life.
Yeah.
And actually, you're right. It is 12 episodes. I mistyped it in my notes here because it is 12.
Okay. Hope Springs Eternal, Sean. It is out there somewhere. People have it. Because I'm fascinated too. I actually, not that like there's a bunch of garbage in Nichijou. There isn't. It's again very consistent. But I would be super curious to see what KyoAni thought would be the ones to kind of put their best foot forward for this rebroadcast in the 12 episodes. And I wonder how that experience would feel. Like, is it like extra dense because it's like the greatest hits? Like, what rhythm does it have? I'd be very curious.
Yeah, you can. So, like, I did find a thing that has the list of what all the different parts are, but also you take forever to kind of hunt down what was Nichijou Part 51.
Yes.
So it's not the most helpful. But like, if you wanted to do a lot of research, you could stitch it all together, because that's all on the Japanese Wikipedia page for this thing has in the subtitle, like what all the different pieces are that go into each episode. And the credits are fucking hilarious because it's just like a dozen people for screenplay and storyboards, because they're just chopped from all the different episodes across the whole thing. So if you want to watch an episode that has storyboards by, Takemoto Yasuhiro and Yamada Naoko and Ishidate Taichi and Ishihara Tatsuya and Kigami Yoshiji, you can watch an episode that's like the super band fucking, Velvet Underground of anime. Like, you could absolutely watch that, because that's what those episodes are.
Yeah, because the show was made, as we transition into credits, as weird as it was made pretty traditionally. There are your typical, like, director storyboard structure. It's not sort of made on a per segment basis, which is interesting. And so, it would be only in the cut-up version, the so-called director's cut. It's really cut of directors, I guess is what you would really think of it as. Do you get all of that? That's fascinating, though. So did that, so it was very popular in that rebroadcast. Did that rebound to any more sort of sales or broader popularity in Japan?
It's hard to tell. Like, that's the thing with sales is I have a hard time finding anywhere that actually sort of shows sales for things that are like that, of like it's hard to find things that give you numbers on like how well did the complete box set sell, that kind of stuff. I have to imagine that at this point, between that and the fact that Nichijou is it is a beloved kind of cult show in Japan, and it's got lots, has gone viral multiple times with clips. People do their edits of the two opening themes because those are very iconic in the kind of internet community. And then obviously it has a whole second life over here, where it also became a weird cult hit amongst anime fans and went viral multiple times with clips of the principal fighting the deer, and that kind of stuff became very popular online. So much so that in 2019, Funimation did their Blu-ray version and did a full English dub of the show, which is, not necessarily unheard of, but it's relatively rare to come back to a show 8 years later and do an English dub then. And so I have to imagine that at this point, Nichijou has proved in the long term a success. It is just in that kind of typical model you think of the framework for what is a success with Haruhi and Keon. Nichijou is not like that at all. But over the long span of history, people know this show fucking kicks ass. And so
I mean, Nichijou got a full dub by Funimation in the US with a Blu-ray release, with a DVD release. That doesn't happen for every show, right?
Yeah.
Like, most anime do not get that treatment, actually. So it clearly has had some measure of success, and obviously the fact that you hear about it, I feel like all the time, not just because you're my friend and you talk about it all the time, but it is a show with, broad, maybe cult, but passionate cult popularity, which, and also KyoAni, they had made a bajillion hits. It's okay if they made one super weird, slight failure at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We can come back to the discussion of like, why did it not succeed? Because I think there's a lot of like kind of interesting stuff there. But let's talk a little bit about the crew and the people who made the show. So the main director here is, our old stalwart, Ishihara Tatsuya, from our key shows. And Haruhi, he's back again to do Nichijou. Interestingly, this is a credit that I almost missed because it's oftentimes not provided on a lot of English sites. And it was only when I was looking at some Japanese stuff that I all of a sudden was like, wait, what is this credit? Which was Fuku Kantoku, or assistant director, which is Ishidate Taichi, which this is like the highest level credit I've seen for him on anything. And it's interesting because I've never seen another KyoAni show that has this credit, or I've not noticed it. I mean, it hasn't certainly been a credit on any show we've watched so far, and it's different than the series Inshutsu thing that like Yamamoto Yutaka had on Haruhi season 1, or that Yamada Naoko will have on Sound Euphonium. This is a different title, and so I don't exactly know what that entails, because again, I couldn't get the fan book, which is usually where you get some of the clear details on that. But, clearly Ishidate Taichi had a higher level of involvement in the production of the show, and that makes sense because he is the guy that anytime there was an episode that had a big action moment, he was the guy who did that episode and usually animated that action sequence. And Nichijou is a show where every episode is the big action episode, even though it's just a show about a bunch of high school girls and a robot and a talking cat and a weird mad professor little girl. But, presumably it's a show on the surface you wouldn't think would have a bunch of action episodes. Every episode has a crazy action scene in it. So it makes sense that he is at a higher level of production here. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
It does to me too, and it's funny because in my notes I would keep noting, was this an Ishidate Taichi episode? Because it felt like one, and usually my instincts on that would be right in the other shows, and I would keep being wrong in this one, because he only directed 2 episodes personally. And I didn't, because as you say, most English language sources don't list that. It wasn't until looking at your notes that I saw that, and I'm like, boy, that explains an awful lot about the style of this show, that he was in. Again, we don't know exactly what it entailed, but clearly some kind of senior leadership position overseeing the entire thing, and that sensibility very much permeates this show.
Yeah, and it's a pretty... Yeah, I was happy when I sort of picked that up as like, oh, here's that credit. I think the reason why it's not on a lot of English sources is just because it's not a standard kind of credit. So It's like if you're a website like Anime News Network, there's no sort of normal format to put it in, because it feels like a credit they kind of invented a little bit for this specific production because the kind of role he played on it. So that's the kind of director stuff. We then have series composition is Hanada Juki, who they are on a bunch of different KyoAni shows from this point forward. We will talk about them again in future episodes, like with Sound Euphonium and a bunch of other stuff. Obviously, Hanada Juki adapting the manga from Arai Keiichi for both Nichijou and Helvetica Standard. We then have the character design and chief animation director is Futoshi Nishia, whom we saw on the season 2 episodes of Haruhi. So the new episodes just for season 2. He was that role for those specific episodes. He has this role also next week on Hyoka. Obviously, this, in terms of art and the character design, is extremely different because it's adapting the manga and is very good at adapting the manga's art style. So you don't necessarily... Like, I would never be able to tell just by looking at it that it's Futoshi Nishia making those character designs. But, he's very, very good at that role, and we'll see some of his stuff again next week.
I definitely feel like this one bends Kyoto Animation's character animation style more to the source material than we've seen from a lot of their other shows.
Yes.
like Haruhi and the Key shows, I feel like definitely while they're pulling from, other kinds of character designs, there is some of the KyoAni kind of house style palpable there. I think this is more what Lucky Star was kind of moving the direction of, but this has obviously quite a bit heavier resources behind it than Lucky Star did, and it's fully into the HD era, so it doesn't have some of that kind of production awkwardness, but it definitely feels like this is a very committed to kind of shifting the visual language towards the manga.
Yeah, and it's also something where the manga's art style is so distinctive because, Lucky Star definitely is similar in the sense of you see that KyoAni has a very clear visual reference with the manga to pull from that they are going really close to, as opposed to like Haruhi and Key, where yes, they have visual reference, but that visual reference is very sparse because it's a visual novel and it's illustrations in a light novel. Whereas a manga, you have visual reference for every single image you're pulling from for your show. But Lucky Star had a pretty typical art style for that kind of manga at the time. So it doesn't jump out as much. Nichijou, there's nothing I've ever seen that looks like this show, and that's true of the manga. Like the manga's art style is not typical manga. Just the way people have these weird blocky feet and sort of very strange proportions. And it's a very peculiar art style that they do a lot to replicate because I think it's important for the humor of the show. In terms of music, we've got Nomi Yuji, that's pretty interesting because he has done a bunch of stuff, but most notably, he is the guy who's the composer for the Ghibli movies Whisper of the Heart and this kind of weird sort of sequel, The Cat Returns. I
really like their music. I'm a fan of both of those movies. Whisper of the Heart is a great movie. The Cat Returns is a fucking weird movie, but I do like it. And the scores of both of those are delightful. And, some of the only non-Joe Hisaishi Ghibli scores, so very notable. Now that you say it, because it's got a similar sensibility where it almost sounds like it's interpolating classical music, and it's not, but it does kind of feel like you're getting like, it's almost Beethoven-esque in places, and it's kind of very stately, which like fits the tone of Whisper of the Heart, becomes kind of a joke in The Cat Returns, and is absolutely the joke in Nichijou, which is that it has this super respectable music layered over this weird as shit, anarchic, crazy show.
Yeah, I adore the music for Nichijou. It's so fun and so weird, and every time I got into a disc and it went back to the main menu and it would play this like, I think it's an oboe, and it's just like burr, 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 burr. I'm like, oh my god, the music for the show is ridiculous and it's great. And then in terms of episode directors, we've got our regular sort of cast of amazing people here. So Ishihara Tatsuya only directed one episode. He just directed the pilot here, or the premiere. Ishidate Taichi did 2 episodes. He did episode 2 and episode 26, which that was like when I finished the show and saw that he did episode 26, that was when I sort of like looked at some more credits again and noticed the assistant director thing. So it's like, that's weird. You don't normally do that. Like you would assume Ishihara Tatsuya would direct the last episode, but that makes a lot more sense when you see he has a bigger credit. And then Ishidate also did the storyboards for the episode 0 OVA. Utsumi Hiroko, who's, again, that's the woman who goes on to do Free shortly after this, really. It's only like a year or two after this. She does a bunch of episodes. She does episodes 3, 9, 18, and 19. Yoneda Mitsuyoshi, he does episodes 4 and 10. We've got Yamada Naoko, does episode 5 and episode 17. Episode 17 in particular is near and dear to my heart for the building the House of Cards sequence, which is the first time I was ever introduced to Nichijou, was I saw that clip online in 2012 or 2013 or so. So it's always seared to my memory. I've got Yamada Naoko to thank for that.
I do want to just flag right here also, 17 is my favorite. This is one where I have a very clear favorite episode. It is episode 17, and it's my favorite because in my notes, this is where I started breaking my 1 segment per rule thing in my notes, where in my notes I was writing like my favorite segment each episode, and in episode 17 I wrote down every single segment. That one is pure gold to me. I love it, and when I saw it with Yamada Naoko at the end, it warmed my heart. My 2 favorites of the show, I'll just say right now, are 17 and 25, and we'll talk about them more later.
Yeah, those are very good episodes. We've got Kigami Yoshiji is here, which is very good to see. He does episodes 6, 14, and 20, which all 3 of those have some of the most famous bits in the history of Nichijou, in particular the principal versus deer thing, which is obviously like the most iconic Nichijou segment. We've got Kitanohara Noriyuki, who does episodes 7, 12, 15, and 24. Sadly, there are no snow episodes of Nichijou for him to be in charge of, but he's got some very good episodes here. Takemoto Yasuhiro, I feel like we're spoiled for Takemoto Yasuhiro because he has 4 full fucking episodes. Usually we only get a couple of them per show because he usually does all of, like, the really important ones. But we have here episodes 8, 16, 22, and 25. All 4 of those are fucking amazing. Sakamoto Kazuya is here. He does episodes 11, 13, 23, and he was the director for the episode 0 OVA. And then we have, this is the first time we've seen this person, Kawanami Eisaku. He directed episode 21. He started as an animator and did key animation for every show that we've watched so far, going all the way back to Air. So he's been at KyoAni for quite a long time at this point. This is the first episode that he directs, and then he goes on to regularly be an episode director in future shows. So we'll see Kawanami Eisaku is a name that will pop up regularly from this point on. His first episode was 21 here. So that's my cast, or that's my crew and who made this show.
While we're here, let's just talk about the music too, because I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, because we have so many things to say, and it's in your notes here. We talked about Nomi Yuji. Let's also talk about the absolute lunatic openings to this show.
Yes, so the opening themes are written and performed by the artist Shadain, who had been creating music and uploading videos on Nico Nico Doga. So he's like, he kind of started getting music out there online. And Nichijou's first opening theme, which is Shadain no Kakakata Kata Omoi Si. All these titles are very hard to say. That's his first single and debut as a regular music artist, and he has gone on to do a whole bunch of stuff. Like he composes more music for other people than he puts out himself, but he does put out music fairly regularly. And so he does both the opening themes here. He also was the composer for the first ending theme, the ZZZ, which is sung by Sayaka Sasaki, but he did the composition for, which I think you can tell because it sounds like one of his songs. And we have talked about Hyadain before on Weekly Suit Gundam, and I mentioned at the time that he was the Nichijou guy. He did one of the endings for the original Gundam Build Fighters, which is Hanpan Spirits, which if you don't remember that song, if you hear about 5 notes of it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's also the guy who did the Nichijou songs, because it's a very, very distinctive musical style he has, particularly for his original songs.
Yeah, that definitely, when I realized that, I was very happy, and it is I do love, we talked about it at the time, we love Hanpan's Spirits, and these are great. I think the second one I particularly loved.
Yes.
It's like, neither of these are probably songs I would put in my playlist and listen to regularly, but I think as openings with the animation, the second one in particular is just kind of this weird tour de force where it feels like it escaped from a mental asylum and is attacking you, and it is nuts. By the time you're getting to the end of it and they're going, Ayoda lehi hoo, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this? It's so great. I love how just fully reflective these openings are of the insanity of the show. Because Lucky Star has a pretty insane opening as well, but I actually think tonally it's not quite actually what the show is, because Lucky Star has craziness to it, but within this package where it is largely much more subdued slice of lifey, Nichijou is up at 11 all the time and insane. And so these openings set the tone well.
Yeah, and they're incredibly iconic because the music and the visual styles both are so distinctive. Like, there's no other openings that look anything like this. The kind of stark white background with the big black text and the camera that's zooming in on all the different casts and stuff like that as it's switching between the different characters. Both of the opening themes are fantastic. Like you, I prefer Hyadain no Jojo Yujo, which is the second opening theme, which is the most insane. There's that part early on where it just the image sort of fractures into the negative of Nano, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is just absolutely fucking insane. The ending theme stuff is also very fun. So you have, for the first core, you've got ZZZ by Sayaka Sasaki, again composed by Hyadain, and that they switch as every couple of episodes. They do a different version of the song. So there's an a cappella version of it. I particularly like the bossa nova version of the song, and I think ZZZ is a fantastic song. Yes. And it kind of if the openings capture the kind of core manic nature of the show, the ending theme, or ZZZ in particular, captures that every once in a while you just have these sort of little sort of quiet moments with the show, particularly on the Nano side of things. That's just about sort of hanging out with these weird people. And it's a very nice ending theme, and I love the animation for ZZZ. And then the second core just has this one of the weirdest things, which gets completely lost on an English speaking audience. If you're English speaking, you can have no idea what the fuck is going on here unless you look it up. Basically, what they do is they have all the main actresses that play the main characters singing songs that are all kind of like cliche, like school choral competition. Like if you're in the school like chorus, here's like the songs that everybody's going to sing, or like songs that are cliche, songs at like graduation ceremonies all the students will sing together. And it's that with like a simple piano accompaniment, which sounds like how it would be done if you're like in a chorus classroom at school and you obviously have the teacher just plays it on the piano and you're all singing. And it's a different song, every single one, for the entire second half of the show. And it's very weird, but I love the animation for it of just this camera panning over this sort of isometric perspective of the city and all the characters just like going about their lives as you just have this weird different song play every single time. It's very strange, but I really love what they do there.
Yes, I like it. I mean, I could recognize what the songs were from my long history watching anime where people sing songs like this. I didn't know each of them individually. I could tell though, these are clearly school graduation songs, but it would be the equivalent of ending a show here where every episode is a version of Pomp and Circumstance, you know?
Yes.
And it's so crazy, but I do love that animation. It's basically if you zoomed it out and did the whole drawing that it's kind of panning through, it would be the Where's Waldo of Nichijou. And I love that image that you kind of see created. It's very cool.
Yes. And then we do, of course, have one insert song, which we'll talk about, which is the song Headlight, Taillight by the great musical artist Nakajima Miyuki, which plays in our sports montage, but we'll talk about that. But yeah, the music is fantastic across the board. The opening and ending themes are great and weird. And I think this transitions into Jonathan. How the fuck do we talk about Nichijou?
Thanks for listening to Japanimation Station. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends.
You can support the show directly on Ko-fi at the link in the description, and remember to check out the Weekly Stuff podcast, our long-running series on movies and video games on all platforms.
And now, back to the show. Yeah, I don't know. You've been talking for a while, so maybe I'll let your voice rest a bit, and I'll just say some of my overall feelings. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, this is a wonderful show. I think for my taste, the show does have, the two cores, and the theme song switches halfway through, but also there is a pretty big change to the dynamics in that the second half has Nano going to school, and so it has much more cooperation among the cast. There's also there are certain plot threads that plot thread is the wrong word, but there are continuing gags, such as the science teacher trying to capture Nano and, dissect her robot body. Or you have the Go Plus soccer club get its new member who is trying to get the advisor, and that becomes an ongoing thing. And I will say for my taste, I liked the second core more, pretty notedly. I liked both. Again, I think there's not a bad episode in the run or anything like that to my taste, but I do think one big change this makes from the manga, because I read some of the first volume too, Sean, is that Nano is there at school with them from the beginning in the manga.
Yes.
That's just an ongoing dynamic. The show is significantly weirder than the manga because it keeps the different groups of characters on islands more in the first core, and so you're not even quite sure of what the relationship between all these people is. There's just the school over here, and then there is crazy the robot's not crazy, but the robot and her crazy little sister / god inventor over here, who she is in a codependent relationship with. And I think, for my taste in the first half, some of that became a little stale over time, where I think the Nano Hakase jokes, particularly before you get the dynamic shift of her going to school would just get a little repetitive for my money of how many times you would have her asking to get the key removed, ask her to go to school, blah, blah, blah. And then you finally do get the incredible catharsis once, Nano, I think it's like she gives Hakase some strawberry juice and then she's like, okay, you can go to school now. And I think that does like shift the dynamics in such a way where there's just that like little bit of added continuity of everyone kind of bouncing off each other more, of having more segments that build on prior segments. That did lead me to like my favorite bits tend to be from the second core of the show because of that. But again, it's not because I think the first core is like bad or anything. But if I were kind of breaking down the show, that's kind of where my like ideas I think would go. And I did wind up binging quite a bit of the show over the last week because I had just when we're recording this, I had a bunch of travel issues trying to get home from Colorado for the break and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have a ton of time to watch it. And then I watched like 3/4 of the show in the last week. So I binged a lot of Nichijou, which isn't, I will say, the best way to watch Nichijou because that's kind of like eating a bunch of candy and getting a sugar high and it hurts your head a little bit. And that's no offense to the candy. It's just not meant to be consumed that way. But yeah, that's kind of my scattershot opening thoughts on the series, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree, and I think most people would agree that the second half of the show is better. But I think that that's like good and intentional. Like I think it's a really smart choice they made to split the two halves and have the Yuko side of the show, the Nano side of the show be very separate, with like just occasional moments where they sort of walk past each other basically. And so you get the sense that they exist in the same world, broadly speaking, but they're not, their lives aren't intertwined. And then once that happens and Nano goes to the school, it does, I think, breathe like a fresh life into the show. And I think like if you had Nano just there from the beginning in the anime, like I think for the manga is a different thing. Like I'm not criticizing the way the manga does it, but for the anime, I think that would have meant that the whole anime would have gotten stale at the halfway point. And then, like, I think that feeling you had in the first half of, like, okay, like, I think I'm kind of done with these kinds of jokes and I'm ready to move on to something new. The show wouldn't have had something new to move on to. So I think it was, like, a really canny choice to split it into those halves, have Nano go to the school at the midway point, and so you get the second half has a slightly different feel, which is really great. And I do think it ultimately means that the second half is better, but I think the whole show is improved from the choice to create just like a little bit of a pivot point, because the show has almost no narrative or character continuity. This is not a show where like halfway through the characters go to the next grade level of the school and all that kind of, like, it just doesn't have that at all. So getting just a tiny morsel of it in there, I think gives a little of extra shape to it as a full season or whatever, as a full, show of television, rather than just, it being gag, 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 and that's all there was. That's all the shape there was to it. The other thing I think is just very interesting about Nichijou is when I kind of have been thinking about this show in the context of us watching all this KyoAni stuff, which obviously is different than the context I've normally watched it in, which is just on its own, is that this show, I think, like, if you take this and you take K-On! And you trace these two shows back to Lucky Star, it really feels like Lucky Star split into two things. Like, and the Moe side of Lucky Star turned into K-On!, which, took the Moe aspects of Lucky Star and sort of made an entire kind of show and aesthetic around it. And then Nichijou took the madness and the sort of weird, idiosyncratic, surreal comedy, like the Lucky Channel segments and stuff like that, which very notably, Hakase is the same voice actress as Akita from Lucky Channel, and Sakamoto is, of course, Shiraishi Minoru from Lucky Channel. So, like, that DNA is very directly there. One of the only sort of sets of returning actors in the show for KyoAni stuff. And so Nichijou kind of took that part of Lucky Star and made an entire show out of it. And I kind of love that. I love that these two things kind of got to sprout off from Lucky Star, which is a show that is kind of two parts and two minds. It's not really quite a full Moe show. It's not really a normal gag anime. We kind of talked about that at the time, that it's kind of like, yeah, it's a Moe anime, but it's a little bit weird in the context of what you think of that now. And then it does feel like these two different kind of shows sprout from all the stuff they were experimenting with Lucky Star. But Nichijou has the same energy of like, here's all these weird segments and little bits and stuff like that kind of give a sort of shape to individual episodes. It's just Nichijou pushes it way further. And so it's got like 20 of them rather than like 2 or 3 of them, which is what Lucky Star had. But
it doesn't have the predictability. Like Lucky Star, part of what, and this is something I love about Lucky Star, is that it's kind of rigid in that you're always going to get Lucky Channel, you're always going to get a weird ending thing, whether it's the karaoke or the video, and the fun of it is the variations on a theme. Like you're going to come back each week and it's going to be the same shape of container, but what goes in that container is going to surprise you. Nichijou is, you have no fucking idea what that container is going to look like. You know some of what's going to go in it, but it's the shape of it's going to be completely different every time. And I don't think one is inherently better than the other, but it's interesting to have both.
Yeah, because Nichijou also, it like sort of uses up some of those and discards them and then brings new ones in. So you've got stuff like, you've got a couple of them that sustain throughout the full show, like obviously Helvetica Standard, which is also like the weirdest of all of them because Helvetica Standard doesn't have, I think, a clear kind of thesis of what those are. They're just kind of gags that are of a different style than Nichijou. But you've got stuff like Love Like, which are just kind of little kind of high school crush cliches, basically, for the most part. And they're just kind of cute little things. And those, you get love likes throughout the whole show, but you get stuff like in the first core, you have the eye catches that are like the rock, paper, scissors segments, and then the jump rope segments that then eventually turn into Nano and Hakase doing little dances. You've got, weird stuff like things that are cool, where Yuko and Mio just pop and go, things that are cool. And then they point as like a bicycle, and it's just shit like that. And you've got so many that you couldn't even remember all of them. Like there's a little stretch of the show where they start doing it with like, here's what white tigers are like, or it's like, here's what Mai's dogs are like, and it just shows you a little bit with an animal. It's chock full of all that kind of shit, of these like distinct specific segments that have little intros and like a little kind of format to them. And again, some of them are kind of sustained, some of them are only happen in a couple of episodes and they never come up again. There's something about that kind of manic energy of Nichijou I kind of really vibe with, that it sort of moves in this way that's so different than any other show, that makes it, I think, very kind of entrancing to me, that there's a kind of almost dreamlike quality of watching Nichijou as a show because it's got all these kinds of little random bits of information, and there are jokes that sort of like sit in the subconscious of the show that come back up very rarely, like the Daifuku Fair skits that there's like a handful of across the whole show, but you get one in one of the first episodes, you get one in one of the last episodes, and there's a couple in between. All of that stuff in the show I really love, but it is also, it gives it a very kind of strange style and structure.
Absolutely. And we talked about this a little bit with Lucky Star, that I do generally really like this kind of approach to adapting. And Nichijou is not always a 4-panel manga, but it has the spirit of a 4-panel manga, certainly. Or a daily comic strip in the US or something like that, right? And I do think, like, even more than Lucky Star, this is such a good approach. Like this, or My Neighbors the Yamadas, or Lucky Star are all, like, sterling examples to me of how you can really purely adapt the structure of a daily comic or a 4-panel comic into something that is more cinematic or televisual, and still keep a lot of what makes following a comic like that fun in a way where, again, I'm like, man, I would love to see Kyoto Animation's version of Calvin and Hobbes. God, I would kill for that. Like, I think in an American context, you look at Calvin and Hobbes, and I think the reason Bill Watterson has been smart to refuse any adaptation is because Hollywood would fuck it and just completely destroy it. But I think you look at, like, there are anime examples where, like, they could do a comic like that really beautifully, because Calvin and Hobbes has all of the Nichijou stuff of, like, the internal recurring jokes that are weird, and the segments, and, like, the spaceman version of Calvin and all of that, whatever you have, that would be very fun to see in a thing like this. And it's just very cool to see, again, something that I've never seen in American production that comes close to cracking the format of a comic like this, that is light on continuity, high on surrealism and anarchy, but it absolutely can be done, and this is a really cool portrait of how you can do it.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's very fascinating to do to kind of like, I think, understand the way that Nichijou ticks is to watch the episode 0 OVA. Because the episode 0 OVA, it's like, it's got a lot of the pieces of Nichijou, because obviously it's adapting stuff from the manga, but it doesn't, as an episode, it doesn't have that structure to it. And it's kind of weird to watch, because I watched it after, I've seen it before, but I watched it at the end of watching the 26 episodes, because on the Blu-ray set, it's in the special features of the last disc. So if you're watching it through, you get to it on the last disc. And it's so bizarre kind of watching it after you've seen the whole show, because it feels kind of hollow, because it doesn't have the energy to it. It doesn't have the verve. It doesn't have the drive. And there's something about sort of just like watching the skits in a purely sustained format that feels kind of like it doesn't have the energy. Whereas the main show, it has the like really long bits that are like, if you cut the whole skit together, is like over 5 minutes long. But most of those, outside of a couple where part of the joke is how long the skit is, like the Fey Kingdom dream sequences from Yuko dreaming about fucking Mio. Outside of those, typically they are intercut with random little one-off things, or at the very least you have one of the strangest but my favorite stylistic touches, which is the weird insert shots of like a fisheye lens just looking at daily life with this kind of like very realistic kind of blurry camera on it. And it's just like, here's a shot of a pedestrian crosswalk, and you're just going to look at it, and you're going to come back to it 3 or 4 times over the course of the episode, and there's going to be something slightly different about it. Sometimes one of the characters will intersect those scenes. Sometimes none of the characters intersect those scenes. But like that sort of is the title of the show, Nichijou, meaning daily life, that you have these sort of like mundane, this is what like the world is actually like. It's just like people sort of like going about their life, or here's a shot of someone doing their laundry or whatever. And then you go back to someone getting bit by a dog and shooting a laser out of their mouth and blowing up a skyscraper, and that sort of manic energy to the editing that is not there in the episode 0 thing, but is there as a sort of core stylistic trait of the main show. I think it shows you how key that is to me for the humor to actually work. Is it needs to have that energy and that sort of bounciness and that flexibility to unpredictably cut and move to different places. So when you come back to this very long sustained skit, it is renewed with new energy.
Absolutely. I think like episode 0, I don't want to say it's bad or anything. It's still up to like Kyoto Animation standards. It gave me a real appreciation for the rest of the show that I think I already had, but like sharpened it, because as you say, it feels thin. It feels like I just rewatched all the Lord of the Rings movies. It feels like butter scraped over too much bread, as Bilbo would say, because it's basically 2 long segments plus a little tiny thing on the train at the end. And while Nichijou has long segments, as you say, usually when they go to a certain length, that becomes the joke, and that's not the point with either of these. They're just kind of like the comic rhythm is off, and it made me appreciate that there's a real density to the main 26 episodes where they are all fucking jam-packed with stuff. And it's the kind of thing where, like, if you're not vibing with one joke, don't worry. Another one is on its way very soon. But I think part and parcel with that is that they're very smart in knowing we can't just be injecting sugar into your veins for the entire runtime every week. That would be exhausting in a way that, like, once in a while Nichijou can be exhausting, although I think it's usually intentional. Like the episode where Yuko and Mio get into the comically long argument after Yuko brings back the wrong lunch, and it just goes on.
The yakisoba instead of the yakisoba,
Yes, that's so good. So good. And the point of that is that you are going to be exhausted by the end of it, and you're thinking about, man, the voice actress for Mio must have had to go, like, on vocal rest for a month after recording this segment. And I think because there is that factor to it, having those little breakup moments, which can be things like a Helvetica standard, which Helvetica standard is very rarely laugh out loud. It is more like, this is fucking weird, I'm going to chuckle. Right?
Yes.
Or you'll have the little dance scene, or you'll have kind of the Eyecatch style version of the title, or as you said, I think most critically, because this is absolutely my favorite structuring thing they do, is the fisheye lens shots, where basically every episode picks some mundane image from some weird angle. It's a very familiar to us as KyoAni fans from Haruhi, I think, of the kind of camera position they choose, and then we'll just kind of observe the world from that position. And some of them are relatively unremarkable, and some of them are funny because of where they interact. Like there's one later on that is from the position of a vending machine, and one of the moments is a guy we've never seen before just coming up and trying to get a can out of the vending machine and doing all of that. And it's like 30 seconds, and it's like very long, but it is the palate cleanser. It's like the ginger you eat between bites of sushi. You have to have that to kind of clean your palate for the next thing you're going to go on to. And I think those are pretty brilliant in that regard. And that's where you just see the structural brilliance of the show is absolutely there. And episode 0 has a lot of the other pieces. It has the art style, it has the animation, it has the music, it has the voice actors, but it hasn't figured out the structure yet. And once they do that, I think that's when it becomes Nichijou.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the KyoAni touch on the show, because I've watched a lot of gag anime, that sort of is generally in a similar style. That is just, like Daily Lives of High School Boys is another one from around this time that's also very popular. That's a very good show, but it is just like skit, 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 and then it's done. And it's very funny and it's very well done, but it doesn't have this sort of extra touch of the madness, the madness of the fucking you're staring into as a viewer of Nichijou, where it feels like the manic nature of the humor breaks outside the confines of the skits and it infects the entire show as an entity. And so there's this almost kind of, because the show has an almost kind of bipolar quality to it, because it has the Yuko segments are usually very high energy, very intense, have like some insane action sequence where it feels like KyoAni has invented like a new way has invented a new manner of drawing people running like 5 different times over the course of this fucking show. But then the Nano segments are usually pretty low energy. They're usually like a little bit more kind of cute, and then about kind of more kind of simple character interactions. They typically aren't like the most laugh out loud, these are my favorite bits in the show, funny. But I think that sort of movement of the energy of the comedy and of the space of the show, it's so kind of extreme that you need all these extra little pieces in there that exist on different parts of that spectrum that help you move and help you sort of like maintain your interest in the show. And it is definitely, it's to me the special touch. It is the thing that makes Nichijou what it is, and why it kind of is, certainly if you're looking at this style of gag anime, it is to me the like kind of pinnacle, because it has found a way to crack this style and bring it into animation in a way that plays to the strengths of animation. That's does things that like the manga would not be able to do, because the manga sits in a very different kind of package than this show does.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I also like talking about the animation. One, in terms of structure, it did make me think, man, I would love to see Kyoto Animation do like Dr. Slump or like some other like shorter Akira Toriyama like gag manga style thing, because I feel like there's a lot of synergy between the styles here. It also, half of the time I was watching this, I was like, we're basically seeing what Kyoto Animation's Dragon Ball Z would look like watching the show, for the amount of like battle sequences, and just I'm going through like Sean all the like screenshots and gifs you have here, and how many of them feel like this is the scene where Yuko goes Super Saiyan and there's just the like the blue background going crazy behind her as she becomes like a mess of line work and all of this stuff. And it was like, Kyoto Animation will probably never do the big shonen battle anime. We just know it would be the most spectacular thing ever made. They're protecting us all from the glory of it. It would blind us. It would be like looking into the sun, but you get glimpses of it in a show like Nichijou, and it's crazy.
Yeah, because, I see people sharing clips from, like, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, or, like, the modern One Piece that has gotten really good. And I'm like, yeah, those are really good, But did you watch the segment where Mio's on the ship in the Fey Kingdom and fights all the guys? It's just fucking like wrecks their shit. It's like the some of the action animation in Nichijou it's like truly next level. And yeah, let's like just talk about the visual style of the animation for a bit here, because it is one of the most important parts of the whole thing, because I think one of the jokes that makes the show work is that the humor in the show is very dumb. Like it's weird, dumb, surreal humor. It's not going for kind of like highbrow, sophisticated jokes most of the time. And so the fact that it has the most luxurious, expensive looking animation I swear I've ever seen in a TV anime for this show is so fucking funny. And it's like, and it needs it for the jokes to work. And I mean, if you read the manga, I think the manga has that kind of similar sensibility. You know, they're pulling from stuff that's in the manga, but KyoAni just is able to do so much with the animation. And I think the style of the characters being relatively simple really also helps. So it gives there's a real sense of fluidity to the animation. But one thing that I think is so remarkable is that the show looks visually just as good in motion as it does if you stop and take screenshots, because there is a clarity to the movement that when I went in, and I didn't have time to take as many screenshots for my notes because I spent so much time on finding the GIFs, because I think the movement is more important for the show. But if you look at some of those action scenes and just sort of look at still images from them, the movement and the lines in the motion is communicated so clearly, even in still images, which is super rare. Like, after I've been doing all the screenshots for stuff like this for my notes, when we get an episode like the episode in Haruhi where you have the big action scene with the girl who tries to kill Kyon, you can't really take screenshots of that scene because there's so much going on, there's so much movement, all that kind of stuff, that individual frames just kind of look like gobbledygook. You can go through frame by frame on the animation of Nichijou. In every frame, you can see what's going on. It's super clear. It looks gorgeous. And there's something about, I think, the simplicity of the art that lends it to that, but also just the level of sort of talent and craft going on here. That means the show has a visual style that's so consistent and so effective at delivering that visual information that it rises so far above any other show, certainly in this genre, that it outclasses shows that are built on movement-based animation like a big action series, and it's fucking crazy.
I'm really glad you put it that way, Sean, because I've been trying to put my finger on what makes the animation so special, and I think you've nailed it. It is that aspect of, in motion, it looks like as good as all the stills. I think that's what you were basically saying. And that is the crazy thing about it. Because I think if you look at the cover of the Blu-ray or any other piece of key art or something, that's not in most cases, that looks nicer than what is in the actual show because someone sat down and put a lot of time into that one image that's going to go out on the poster, right? Nichijou, just in every frame, looks like that. It has this solidity to it. This is why seeing it on Blu-ray, I think, is so key and this is such a good go-to example of why physical media still matters and is better than streaming quality, because it has that sheer clarity. And yeah, I don't know if I could immediately point to another anime that has that quality as firmly, where there is just such a complete hegemony between the stills and the movement, and that is something that makes this show absolutely incredible to look at, and as you were saying, is also so key to the jokes, because it's not as funny if the gag isn't, this is the greatest animation in the world being put towards the stupidest fucking shit we can think of. That's the joke, and it's great.
Yeah, and it's incredible. And then you also just get moments where they, there's a real solidity and a consistency to the art until they decide to sort of break it and do something totally nuts. Like in episode 2, which is the Ishidate Taichi episode, that's the first one where you get the big, crazy, one of their big crazy chase scenes where the whole world just sort of devolves into motion lines and the color gets wiped away as Mio is chasing Yuko down the hall because Yuko took her notebook with the sexy
manga.
BL drawings in it. And it's I'm just looking at my GIFs from that chase, and it's just it's the most incredible shit you have ever seen. And it's so cool to see the way that the art style gets to sort of like shift to sort of communicate the movement and the energy of what's going on there, while still being so identifiably Nichijou. It's just, yeah, the art in the show and the movement, it's incredible. There is a reason why this show has like over twice as many pages on Sakugaboru, the like animation fan site that posts animation GIFs. It's got 15 pages. Like everything else that we've covered has like 5 or 6 at most. It's like it's dense with great animation across every single episode, and it is incredible.
Yes, and it does kind of feel like the whole KyoAni team, because the gang's all here, as you noted on the crew list, it's all the greats, just kind of cutting loose with all of their talents in a direction where they kind of aren't having to, I don't know, like space it out or think about it as much as you would in a show like K-On! Or Clannad that has careful character consideration and continuity and all that. This is, okay, well, we're going to have a scene where Yuko accidentally, presses her mechanical pencil and the lead goes into her finger and breaks the skin of her finger, and then the entire planet gets destroyed from her rage over this. Who wants to animate that? And it's just like, yes, we're gonna cut loose and go crazy. And how many shows, give you that opportunity to begin with? But if they did, how many shows have the Kyoto Animation bench of talent to do that consistently for 26 episodes in a very, very, very dense package? That's what makes this so special.
Yeah. It's incredible. Like, it defies words, really. It's something where every time I go back and watch the show, it's just it exceeds my expectations from my memory every single time because it just looks so good.
Absolutely. So where do you want to go next? Do you want to talk about some of our favorite segments? Do you want to talk about some of your favorite animation? Any more of that?
Let's go through the top 10 segments, because a lot of that will hit the animation either way, at least.
Actually, you know what? One thing before that, do you want to just talk about the characters really quick? I think that'll be good before we get into the segments, because I think that'll help us hit on a couple of other points if we just talk about the crazy little cast of characters we have here.
Yes, because obviously Nichijou has a massive cast of characters, just a huge number of characters across the show, especially if you're including the weird one-off, like, here's the Angel in Helvetica Standard and all that kind of stuff. It's got a truly absurd number of characters. Obviously, you have your kind of core 6, though, that are the main focal ones that are split across the two kind of sides of the show. And one thing that's very interesting is, by and large, they cast unknown rookie voice actors for almost all of the main cast. It is only characters on the edges that typically have a more notable or recognizable voice actor. So you have, for the kind of the school girls, the 3 ones at the school, for the whole show, you've got Yuko, who's voiced by Mariko Honda, who she has been in a couple of other notable roles since then. She's Judy in the Tower of God anime, which that show is pretty good. She's Kurimu Sakurano in Seitokai no Ichizone, which that was a visual novel that got an anime adaptation, and she's also one of the main characters, Karuko no Kunji in Wagamama High Spec. But again, this is not, and this is true of like kind of all the main actresses here. They're in some other stuff, but this is not like K-On!, where every single main actress was relatively unknown when they were cast and went on to be some of the most successful voice actresses in the business. Like, they've got successful careers, but they're not like the kind of star voice actors, unfortunately. And I think that partially is just due to the fact the show was not a success when it came out, and it more kind of became a cult hit after the fact. We then have, let's just go through these 3, so then we'll talk about them. So you've got Mai Aizawa, who plays Mio Naganohara, who's, I think, probably my personal favorite character in the show. She's been in a few things. She's actually has some small roles in other K-On! Stuff, or in KyoAni stuff. So she's Minagishi Ayano in Lucky Star, who's one of the sort of like side girls in that show. She's the TV version of Yumemi, who's the main character in Munto. So not the OVAs, but when they did the TV version of it, that's that Kikami Yoshiji original anime. She's one of the characters in Midai Nikki, or Future Diary Minene Udu. And she's Nishina Rie, the violin girl in Clannad. And then she's also, I thought this was interesting, she's Marie Rose in the Dead or Alive games, which that's one of the kind of main Dead or Alive characters. And then the last of the 3 kind of schoolgirl characters is Misazu Togashi playing Mai. who she's been in a few things. She's also in Date Alive, which has like 6 fucking seasons or something at this point. I don't know how that show just keeps on going. She's also in Future Diary. She's also in Seitokai no Ichizone. She plays, I love this, she plays the M16A4 in the show Upote, which is a show about what if you made anthropomorphized cute Japanese like anime girls out of firearms. So she's the M16. She's the Japanese anime girl version of the M16 in that show. And then this is an interesting credit. She is Lev in the Japanese dub of The Last of Us Part 2, which was not a thing I was expecting to see, but that's obviously, that's a very big character in that game. So let's talk about those 3. So that's our kind of the schoolgirl characters, Yuko, Mio, and Mai, and this is obviously, I think, for me, my favorite side of the show. It's the side of the show that has the highest energy of gags, and all 3 of these performances I just fucking adore. I think all 3 actresses, while they're obviously sort of, unknowns, they approached their roles with, like, particularly Yuko and Mio, such incredible energy. Obviously, Mai is a very low energy character, but there's a lot to that performance as well. And I think that they just give great performances that it's very good. I think that they are not the kind of regular anime voice actors you get. They're not voices you're very used to hearing. It's not the sort of like regular cast of voices you've heard in every other show. And there's something about that with Nichijou I've always enjoyed, that the characters have a very unique quality because they're pretty fresh young voice actors.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Yuko and Mio. I like that they are clearly friends in the sense that they both rely on each other and drive each other absolutely fucking crazy. It's great. I definitely saw just a tiny bit of You and Me in high school in these 2,
yes.
With Yuko continually forgetting her homework and asking if she can copy Mio, and Mio getting more and more mad. Not saying I ever did that, but I did.
Absolutely, I am the Mio and you're the Yuko. Like, I would, like, 100% that is the dynamic. It's yes, I've been well aware of that with this show for a long time.
Okay.
That, like, I vibe a lot with Mio as a character.
Yes.
Outside of sure, I'll throw the BL manga in there too. I can fuck with it. I ain't got no problem with it.
I mean, I've never seen you do BL manga, but that'd be cool. No, it's definitely, I understand that dynamic very deeply because I have lived it, and it's great. And then I like that Mai on the side, though, is basically a sociopath. She freaks me out a little bit. Because she's like there's a stereotype there of the kind of quieter girl in the friend group that you see in every anime, but it is taken not to 11, but like to 50, of just that she is like completely unemotive, but with a little bit of like sinister edge to it, where she is just kind of tormenting her friends, like ostensible friends half the time. I'm not sure we ever see anything from Mai that actually indicates she considers these people friends, other than like they sit next to each other in class and sometimes walk home next to each other, and therefore they are considered friends. I don't know if Mai actually thinks of these people as friends. She does not seem to act like it, and it's very funny. She wants to hang out and carve her Buddha statues and just kind of ignore the people around her, and she's very good at that. Some of the only like outer kindness we ever see her give to anyone is to Nano a little bit in the second half of the show, and otherwise she is completely in her own world and basically never thaws for the entire run, and I kind of love that dynamic.
Yeah, I love Mai. I think Mai is a character that, to me, every time I rewatch the show, she gets funnier and funnier to me because it's so weird. Like, there's one bit, I think it's in episode 1, where, yes, it's in episode 1, there's a little tiny insert gag where she's playing Frisbee with her weird fucking dogs. I love her fucking weird ass dogs.
Yes.
I love that there's like 3 or 4 different ways that dogs are drawn in this show. I love that there's no consistent animal style. The animals are different depending on which animal it is. But there's this bit where she throws a Frisbee and the dog goes running after to try to catch it, and then she fucking shoots it with a shotgun like it's a clay pigeon right before the dog grabs it, and the dog just looks back at her with a blank expression. And yeah, it's like Mai's just insane. There's the one where they're doing whatever the game is, where they're like hopping up the stairs one step for each syllable for like the longest word they can come up with, and she just goes all the way up with this weird thing, and at the top she just turns around and says, "The Buddhist incarnation of resurrection." And it just cuts to the main credits. You're like, what the fuck is with this girl? Or all the time she fucks with Yuko's sense of humor, where she's like, Yuko's trying to be a Tsukomi to her bouquet of setting up all these weird jokes, and she's trying to stop, and Mai just keeps on doing more and more and more outrageous shit to taunt her. Yeah.
I love the dynamic that you get later on, they're doing their like guidance counseling with the teacher, and they're all saying like what they want to do in the future. And of course, Yuko has no idea. Mio wants to be a mangaka, but she doesn't really want to admit it. So she's written it very small on the paper. I think she could make it. I think she's got the talent. I think Dojin's, a big scene. I think she's going to go far. And then Mai just holds up her Buddha statue. And it's like, right, Mai's already got a craft. She's great at this. She's just going to carve all those Buddha statues and become very successful, or become like the weird guy in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, who's just got surrounded by Buddha statues and you come and visit him. I think that's who Mai would be. But I do love that she is essentially a craftswoman already in life. She's very talented at this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Mai so much. There's that one bit where she's playing with Yuko. I love all the bits where she's just fucking with Yuko. And it's the one where they're doing like rock, paper, scissors or whatever. And then if you lose, you have to cover your head because the other one's going to hit you with like the paper or whatever. And Mai's just fucking with her. And then at some point, Yuko says that like, what are you doing with those Buddha statues? And she says, well, because they're cool. And she's like, no, they're not. They're not cool. And then there's just this one shot where her eyes narrow like a fucking millimeter. And that's where when they do the game again, and she just smacks Yuko in the head with the fucking Buddha statue. And it zooms in on Yuko and she's just like, ah! And it goes, God is dead on screen. And
that's a great one.
Mai is just a fucking monster. Like, it's like, don't insult her Buddha statues or she will fuck you up.
It's great. Yeah. It's a
right.
good it's not, a group of characters who you're necessarily going to get a ton of warm fuzzies from like you will in Lucky Star. A couple here and there, but they are very good for humor. And even if you're not going to always get warm fuzzies, the Yuko Mio dynamic in particular is going to put you on the spot a little bit, make you feel like I've lived this if you're me or Sean.
Everybody is either a Yuko or a Mio. Like, everyone had that relationship with a friend in high school. Like, I'm convinced it's just, you can split the world down as Yuko and Mios. It's just the way it works.
The disappointing friend and the good friend.
It's more, I think it's more complicated than that.
Okay. Thank you. That's very generous of you, Sean.
And we all have a bit of a Yuko and a bit of a Mio in us, probably like one of the moments I feel most seen by an anime is Yuko trying to order from like fake Starbucks and having no idea what the fuck to say.
That's so good.
So we'll get to some of those bits. But let's talk about the second set of main characters, which is the Shinonome characters at the Shinonome lab who, just go about their peaceful days, as the narrator constantly likes to remind us at the end of segments. Yet another day, peaceful day at the Shinonome lab. Here's where you have Nano, who is voiced by Shizuka Furuya, which this is a kind of interesting story with her that I had no idea about till I looked it up. She had a big accident in 2015 where she was hospitalized and suffered memory loss for several years and then recovered, and she's recovered now, and she started voice acting again in 2020, and she's been voicing characters mostly in like mobile games and kind of that side of things. She hasn't been in a lot of anime since, but it's just like kind of a weird story, as you just not like expect to read about someone getting a huge accident and actually suffering from temporary amnesia. But luckily she's recovered and is back in working again and seems to be doing well. But she was in a few other series before, or like around the same time as Nichijou before that accident. She's one of the main characters in Another, which is a quite good horror anime. There's not a lot of horror anime, weirdly enough, and so if you want to watch one, Another's quite good. And then she's also one of the main characters in Makenki, which, if I remember correctly, that is an incredibly horny anime. That's my only impression from that show I remember watching. Then we've got our two main kind of returning actors here that we know very well. We've got Hiromi Konno as Hakase, who was, of course, if you remember all the way back to Air, she was the weird dog Potato in Air. She's Kogami Akira in Lucky Star. And then she's also her other really big characters. She's the character Nakata Sae in the Amagami series of dating sim games. And then everybody's favorite actor, Minoru Shiraishi as Sakamoto the cat, who, of course, we were introduced to as Taniguchi in the Haruhi show, but we really got to love as himself / Sebastian, the not butler, but ever treats him as a butler at the school character from Lucky Star. So you have your Lucky Channel returning with a very different dynamic, because obviously Hakase and Sakamoto are very different characters, and in some ways their roles are kind of reversed from the kind of dynamic that was on Lucky Channel. But here you get your kind of, I don't even know how you describe this side of the show. The like, if you're going to sort of try to pigeonhole Nichijou as being a moe show, this is the only segment of the show you could kind of say is slightly moe adjacent, because Hakase and Nano are very cute. But yes, this is like a very weird part of the show where you've got a robot, you've got a child mad scientist who somehow is able to invent a robot and a talking cat scarf, and then you've got a talking cat. And they just sort of exist in the world along with Mio, Yuko, and Mai, who, outside of the ridiculous kind of way the events are depicted in the show, are ostensibly normal high school girls. And here you've got robot scientist and talking cat.
Yeah, I don't know if moe really applies. There's the thing in episode 0 where Hakase has a cold and Nano is having to like have her blow her nose and all that stuff. And that was one of the moments where I'm like, I actually don't think this is quite right for Nichijou. This feels too moe. This feels like too pure moe. Because the thing about Hakase is that she's kind of evil in a weird way. Like, she is, I don't think actively malevolent, but she is basically this girl who has godlike powers of creation that happen off screen and we never see, and is like clearly a genius, but she has created for herself a world where she can be the pampered little sister, basically, right?
Yeah.
Where she has created her own big sister figure and is like living out that fantasy, but also keeps that big sister figure for the first half of the show trapped in her house, and in the second half of the show won't take off the giant key that is the only obvious sign that this girl is a robot. So she can create like perfect android life, but she puts on the giant key so that no one can see. And even at her kindest, when she, in the final episode is finally going to get rid of Nano's key, it's just actually temporary so she can install something that will make the key spin really fast when Nano gets happy. Hakase might be the god and the devil all in one. It's amazing. It's hilarious. And then you've got my boy Sakamoto, who is just a whole mood onto himself. I love that we get another starring role from Minoru Shiraishi, who is just a fucking gem of an actor, as the person on the side commenting on the absolute insanity of the situation he has found himself in. This is not like enough of a segment for it to be in my top 10, but I do have to say the joke you find out in the finale that Sakamoto was the cat of the scientist lady at the school, and he was just absolutely tormented by this horrible woman and escaped and came to the relative peace and comfort of the Shinonome lab, is one of the best jokes in this entire show. This is a very weird family unit. They're not really moe, but they're adorable and a little terrifying.
Yeah, and I love Sakamoto in particular because the way in which he's trying to sort of be the adult, right? He's trying to be like the father figure, but he is also a cat, so he just gets distracted by random cat-like things. You have in episode 3, which is like kind of like the big episode where he's fully introduced, you have the scene where they put the scarf on him and he starts talking. And he's starting to demand respect from them, and they're talking to him. It's like, oh, Sakamoto, and he just turns to them and goes, Sakamoto-san, like it's Sakamoto-san, right, with a weird Kansai accent that he doesn't really have most of the time. And then Nano just picks him up and goes, I'm going to put him back where you found him, okay? And then Nakase's like, okay, because they're annoyed by him trying to sort of demanding respect from them. And Sakamoto deserves respect, but he very rarely gets it.
That is very true. Yeah, and then Nano is just our poor, Sisyphus of the show, trying to push that boulder that is Hakase and her own key up the hill and never really making it up. She's like the closest you have to like your sort of normal protagonist of the show who has some continuity and some sort of want, need, drive in life. Yuko, Mio, Mai, everyone else is much more sort of moment to moment. Will I do my homework or not? Nano is the robot girl who wants to be human in a world where everybody is weird to begin with, and she is kind of your sort of heart and soul center of the show because of that.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely the, like, part of the joke is that she's meant to be a robot and she's sort of doing the, like, I want to seem like a normal person. And she is the only normal person in the show. Everybody else is some brand of maniac. Like Yuko and Mio are not the most insane of everyone we meet, but they're still pretty extreme. But Riznaona's like, you're a pretty normal, just kind of mild-mannered high school girl. You just happen to be a robot with a giant, weird wind-up screw key in your back. Which also just have to give shout out to that character design, obviously coming from the manga. There's something so, I think, distinctive to me about that, the big wind-up key, and it is kind of like, to me, the kind of iconic image of Nichijou. It's the shot that the show ends on in episode 26. The last thing it shows is just the image of the key, and you can see a little bit of her back and then the logo of the show on it, and that's like the last image you get from the series. I do think it's to me a very iconic character design.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I knew that character very well going into this show just because you see her in art and out in the world a lot, I feel like, because that key is such a crazy big symbol on the back. And again, this is where I feel like there is such an Akira Toriyama energy to a lot of these segments in kind of that it's literally the Dr. Slump dynamic to a certain degree, but with the roles reversed in a weird way, where instead of a father creating a daughter, it's a little girl creating a big sister, basically, and caretaker. But it has some of that to it, and it did make me feel like, oh man, I would love to see, like, I don't know, like a 45-minute OVA of KyoAni doing Dr. Slump bits would be very funny. Although, again, we're pretty close to it with some of this anyway, just less perverted, I guess you would say. But no, it's great. And I think I'm with you. I like the other side of the show more. And particularly, I think in the first half, some of the Nano Hakase dynamic can get a little repetitive, but it is very fun. And in the second half, you also get a segment that just missed my top 10, which is when the crow comes to visit. And gets the scarf for a day, and you have a reunion. Basically, they just full-on recreate the dynamic at the end of Lucky Star, where Ono Daisuke has taken over Lucky Channel and is the cool, suave boy that Minoru Shiraishi could never be, but now it's the crow versus the cat. Oh, that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
Yeah, that one is in my top 10, but you brought it up, like, yes, it is just, like, specifically the most high-level shit imaginable. Is not just that you bring Ono Daisuke back and they're recreating, as you say, the Lucky Star dynamic, but that he played the crow in fucking Air. So he's back again because he played the main character in Air that turned into a crow by the end of that show, and he's playing another crow, but it's not just a crow, it's like this weird triangle crow. It's like, because there are other crows. You see other birds in the show. They're drawn normally. Then you have the weird kind of chicks that are sort of, I think, like kind of the logo or kind of icon for Nichijou that are just like kind of the two S's almost that they look like. They're colored yellow. And then you've got this crow that's just a big fucking triangle with like a frayed end at the bottom and with two like stick legs. And that's just the crow, and he's just a talking crow. And his mouth just animates on ones or it just is like, I guess just two frames is the way to say it. It's like one frame that's the mouth all the way open, one frame that's the mouth is closed. And that's just how he talks. And that's just, he is a weird cartoon character that came out of a different cartoon, and he's great.
Yes, we'll talk more about that later. And then there's a shit ton of other voice actors in this show, Sean, who show up. A lot of them one-offs, but you do have a list of a couple of notable actors who we hear from more than once.
Well, this is the list. I honestly, on my notes, I gave up on following the voice actors. Okay. That's because it was too hard. So I don't think we need to go through those. Like, one thing to mention, and we can maybe point out a couple of these, while we're like thinking specifically about voice actors, is the next episode previews, which is the most I have ever stretched that phrase talking about an anime at this point. There are some shows we talked about, like Lucky Star, that don't really have next episode previews that call them this. This is the least next episode previews ever. But they do this insane thing where they pick a random inanimate object that featured in the episode and then have a like truly like legendary tier voice actor come in and do a couple of line narration, just saying like, "Hi, I'm a Frappuccino. Man, it sure is hard being a Frappuccino. Anyways, next episode is Nichijou episode 5 or some shit like that," and that's it. And you look at it, it's like, oh, this is like, one of the most, here's Masako Nozawa's in here. Here's Megumi Ogata, fucking Shinji from Neon Genesis Evangelion is in here. Mami Koyama's in here. It is just every legendary voice actor. Some of them are like going back to like, they're like 70 years old. You're going back to like black and white golden era anime like Masako Nozawa. Like it's ridiculous the people they have on this list.
Oh, these are the best next episode previews I've ever seen. I love them to death. They're so good, and it is such a joy as each one starts to try to figure out, wait, is that a person X, and then their name will come up, and it is. Like one of the ones that got me was when it's Norio Wakamoto, who has you might know him as Cell from Dragon Ball. He's in a bunch of stuff, but like he has, especially in his advanced age, this just great mumbly gravel voice, and he is voicing the wooden cube that Neo wears in her hair. And I'm like, is that fucking Norio Wakamoto? And then his name comes up and you're like, yeah. And then a couple episodes later, you've got Aya Hirano. My brother and I were watching episode 10 together when it was Masako Nozawa, and we're like, fucking Goku's in this? Oh my god.
Because she also specifically doing the Goku voice too. And
yes.
she is the origami folded frilled necked lizard in that one.
She does the Os Orachinai. She does the thing from Dragon Ball that she does on every episode. My favorite one, though, and I loved this so much I considered it for my top 10 segments, but I thought, I don't know if the next episode preview counts as a segment, and I had a lot of these anyway, so I cut it. My favorite one of these is episode 21, when it's fucking Sumi Shimamoto, who is as storied as anyone on this list. I mean, that is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Winds herself. We love Sumi Shimamoto, and she comes in to just absolutely fucking neg you as the viewer, because the joke is that earlier in the episode you have the whole thing about the lover's umbrella with the two names on each side, and it's about the two teachers you see earlier in the episode. But she says, why don't you try drawing her again? Write your own name on the right, and oh, you don't have a name to write on the left? For all you lonely viewers out there, the next episode of Nichijou is episode 22. Don't miss it. And it's just, there's something about pairing that such cruel narration with Sumi Shimamoto, who has the most gentle, loving voice. I mean, Nausicaa is basically a Christ figure in that movie, and she is the person, obviously, who is best suited to voice it. And to have her do this, it is like the most cruel narration. It's hilarious. I fucking died at that. One of the biggest laughs the whole show got from me.
Yeah, and it's so funny having all of those. And then you do have like a couple other things like that where you have in the word time segments, which are like some of like the weirder, just like, this is like, hey, word time. And then here's an image and you just get a little narration of just a quaint observation about this thing. And those are all by Yuko Minaguchi, who's of course Videl in Dragon Ball Z. We saw her in Kanon as the mom in that show. And so she's there. You have in the Fey Kingdom segments, of which you have the three of those, all the random faceless goons who are like the guys with like the green jackets and the green hats, all of them are different random super popular really well-known voice actors, with the main one being Hochu Otsuka, who people make best known as Jiraiya, the mentor figure from Naruto. But it's all of them are other like huge big name voice actors.
The episode 22 has a procession of them that starts with Joji Nakata, then is Akio Otsuka, then is Hochu Otsuka. And I thought I was going crazy. That you have Joji Nakata, Akio Otsuka, Hochu Otsuka as this procession of big burly guys who get beat up by Mio in those sequences. It's unreal. It's so great.
And they're all just random one-offs. Whereas, you have in the main cast it's almost nobody is a really recognizable voice actor.
Yeah.
Like one of the probably like the highest profile ones is the male teacher. I forgot to put this in my notes. He's voiced by Inaba Tetsu, who's in a bunch of stuff. He's like Gamagori in Kill la Kill and stuff like that. And you probably will recognize his voice. But by and large, all the other characters like Sakurai Sensei, Nakanojo, the guy with the mohawk, the principal, the vice principal, like all of those random people, like Faye and Weboshi and Misato, the tsundere, all of those characters are, very small voice actors that were all novices. Sasahara Senpai is a fairly small, like not particularly well-known voice actor at the time. Like, it's such an interesting strategy they went for. Like, on the fringes of the show, we're going to cast big names, but then all the core people are going to be very kind of fresh, fairly unknown voice actors. And I kind of love it. Like, I love that approach. It gives just such a different energy to the show, and the kind of performances you get.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the voice acting is immaculate throughout. It's very good. This is something we probably don't even talk about enough with KyoAni, is just that And I think it's because voice acting in Japan is generally wonderful, but their voice direction is outstanding,
Yes.
from whoever they're getting. And I do love the blend here. It's very, the main voice actors are great when you get those. And it just makes the cameos stand out. Because, you don't have voices like Joji Nakata in this show much. And so when you hear him come in going full Kiritsugu on us from Fate Stay Night, it's like, what the fuck? And then suddenly it's Akio Otsuka. It's crazy. And I love all of that. I love the end sequence. I love just imagining the, procession of people who were coming into the booth each week to do the next episode previews. Oh, it's so fun.
Yeah. It's absolutely absurd, and I adore it. Are there any of the sort of minor characters you want to talk about before moving into the segments, or you just want to jump straight to the top 10 segments?
Let's jump to the top 10 segments, because some of those minor characters will come up. And frankly, talking about this show is kind of like talking about The Simpsons. You would run out of time before you mentioned every character. There's so many characters,
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Sean, I'll kick us off, and then I'll let you go, and we'll go back and forth like we do any other top 10 list. So these are our top 10 favorite Nichijou segments, defining segment however you want, because it's kind of weird. But my number 10 is in episode 21, where Yuko has done her homework for once, but she did a bad job, and so the teacher comes over and hits her on the head with his notebook. But they do this endless string of repetitions where it is a very normal thing in an anime to have someone get hit or something happen and you get 1 or 2 repetitions. It's kind of like the thing in, Jackie Chan's Police Story where they do the big stunt 3 times on the they did it once, but you see the 3 camera cuts. That idea, that's very common in anime. Instead, they do it. I counted. I got out I have a little counter. It's like one of those golf counters or something that people use in sports to count people on the field. I use it to count shots and sequences when I'm doing film analysis. But I got it out. I counted how many times you hear Yuko go, 49 times is how many times you see this happen. And actually, you see it happen more because it becomes this mosaic of split screen images. But I don't even know if that counts as a segment. It's basically just one joke within an otherwise completely unremarkable, intentionally unremarkable scene. I died laughing. I had to watch it several times. I counted. And when I say I counted 49 times, at a certain point, I was having trouble hitting the button on my counter fast enough. So I don't know if that's even accurate. But it's at least 49 times that Yuko gets hit on the head with that notebook, and it is amazing.
Yeah, that's an incredible bit. You texted me about it after you counted the segment. I told you this, the sound that Yuko makes after she gets hit is burned into my subconscious because I've watched the show enough that it's just as I have a weird, almost Pavlovian response to it. When I heard that noise, I'm like, oh, right, this is that bit. But the best part of it is that it's is the huge variety of different ways they show and layer on the image, or as you say, it expands out to a mosaic as she gets hit and stuff like that. It's just, it goes and goes and goes. It's so incredibly inventive. Yeah, that is an incredibly good bit in Nichijou. My number 10 is a segment we've kind of talked around a little bit here, but is also in episode 21, a good episode. This is, I call it The Warriors of the Fey Kingdom Battle Mio. This is the finale of the Fey Kingdom trilogy of episodes, where the first episode is about the bad guy who's trying to take control of the Fey Kingdom and capture the princess so he can get the wooden cube. The second segment is the one where they all have to go, this one's also very good, where they all have to go do comedy routines to use the princess, and they all keep on failing and getting dropped to their fucking deaths, which that's so funny. But episode 21 takes the cake, the final one, because this is the one that is just purely the Dragon Ball episode, where it's just all of them coming one after the other, each one voiced by an even more prestigious old, for very deep voiced masculine voice actor, and she just sort of beats the ever-living shit out of all of them. And there's so many great gifs. There's one of the first guys that comes up, has the little pointy beard on his chin, and she uppercuts him, and the fucking beard goes flying off into the air, and then she teleports next to him and punches him into a puff of smoke. It's just an incredible series of different weird bits where they're there's no way I can let this end, and they go power up Dragon Ball style, and she just sort of backhands them and goes sending them flying into space. This is just one of those where they're really sort of stretching their animation muscles as it gets more and more and more ridiculous and more over the top in how excessively dramatic they are playing the scene as these just random dopes just get beat to shit.
Absolutely. I will have more to say about the Fae Kingdom in a little bit. My number 9 is from episode 25, one of my favorite episodes, which is the just absurdly amazing sequence of Mio running while Yuko chases her, getting crazier and crazier. One of my favorite segments in the show has a very sweet resolution, and overall, one of the reasons I love episode 25 so much is it has this, more than really any other episode, this kind of like narrative structure to it, where it starts with one of those segments about Sasahara and the tsundere girl trying to they're doing their, I think there's a whole thing around the vending machine or something, but he breaks his glasses.
Yes, because this is my number 9 as well. We've lined up here because this is where she has accidentally broken his glasses, so she says like, oh, I'll be your eyes for the day. And that is also just an incredible segment that ends with him revealing that they're fake glasses, and she basically blows up the entire school. And she has a line that is, I put in my notes, the funniest tsundere line ever of all time, where she says, look, there just happened to be a bug on your right arm, and I was only trying to slowly crush it with mine, okay? Which is the best tsundere excuse I've ever seen. But yes, so you have that scene, then it cuts to earlier from Mio's perspective. She sees that, and then she runs, and she fucking, and Yuko's like, no, go to the classroom and tell the teacher we're going to be late. She chases after Mio as she jumps through the fucking window, and it's just a ridiculous series of different events as she's just sprinting through the street. She stops and starts shadowboxing for no reason, and the random boxing coach dude sees her and starts chasing them also, and then it all culminates into her going and saving the boy who's drowning in the fucking river and learning the meaning of life, which is that life is a lot like baseball.
It's so good. It's got some of the best animation in the entire show, which is saying something because this show has incredible animation, but just the amount of speed, the number of scenarios where they're running. It's the kind of classic Nichijou gag in that it starts from this very small place of Mio also has a crush on Sasahara, so she's running away kind of sad, but of course it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they are learning the meaning of life. It's true, you never know what's going to happen. That's why it's interesting, like baseball. And then she's also scouted by a boxing guy who is this old man who shows up several times to say absolutely crazy things, and I think he's just insane and making shit up every time, but it's amazing every single time. And yeah, I actually thought episode 25 would have been a perfect finale, because that one also ends with the whole thing where they give her the Friend for Life coupon to try to cheer her up. And she has the line about that our ordinary lives that pass day by day may actually be a series of wonderful miracles. And then she says, all right, let's go home and draw manga. And I'm like, that would be a great final line for this show. I'm glad episode 26 exists too, because it's also very sweet. But yes, all of episode 25 is great. That one segment in particular, though, is great enough to be my number 9. I fucking love it.
Yeah, because this was one for me, because mine is also that scene is my number 9. It was either this or the sequence in episode 2 we kind of talked about, which is the kind of precursor to this one, which is the other scene where Yuko chases Mio and it just becomes insane and over the top. But I think the episode 25 one, because it evolves in so many other ways as it goes through, because you have like these sequences where Mio, as she's running, is just flashing back to seeing Sasahara and the tsundere girl arm in arm, and with like a weird like VHS filter on it, basically. And then you get all these intercuts as she's doing more and more ridiculous shit, like the shadow boxing, like she jumps onto one of the like high bar things and starts spinning on it rapidly, and you get these sort of intercut of Yuko's face coming on. She goes, Mio-chan, 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 over and over, and then eventually it happens so much that she just goes, Chan Mio, Chan Mio, Chan Mio, as Mio's fucking down, like swimming in the river and all this fucking absolute mad shit that's going on. Yeah, like this is a sequence that's so crazy. I have 7 different GIFs in my notes just for this one scene. That's how many GIFs I found for it on Sakagaboru. There's the one part where they're on the fucking train tracks and there's a train coming from both directions, and then they like pass and they're like flat against them, like still like shuffling along in between the two trains. It's absolute fucking madness. It's so good. Yeah, this show is fucking great.
It's fucking great. I love it. Okay, that's my number 9 and your number 9. So my number 8 is what I have written in my notes as the completely horrifying, surreal, mind-numbingly long elevator sequence from episode 8, which is basically this episode that has plopped in the middle of it a full avant-garde short film by Kyoto Animation, which is where our 3 main girls are stuck in an elevator. It comes in completely out of context too. It's not like they get on the elevator and realize they're stuck and we follow them. The whole scene is completely dialogue free. They've already been stuck in the elevator. It's this series of like weird experimental camera angles. It's all these like frames within frames and like split screens and kind of boxes on screen in different places, sort of like the 24 effect from that show, but they're kind of like fading in and out in weird ways. And then at the end, they start laughing and all go insane, and it cuts, and there's no beginning, there's no ending, there's just the insanity. Frankly, one, I think, real reading of Nichijou is that the entire show is happening in that elevator as they are losing their minds, and everything else is a fucking fantasy that they are having in their addled brains as they are stuck in this elevator asphyxiating.
Yes. This is one of my. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about it now. It's on later on my list, but I just want to talk about it. So for me, this is my number 7 because it's also on my list. But like one thing about this is, so the episode 8. This is a Takemoto Yasuhiro episode, and this 100%, I am convinced this is his pseudo sequel to his bit from the Lucky Star OVA, which is the absolutely insane part of the end of that OVA with all the insane camera angles and they turn into fucking frogs or whatever, because it's so like that, and it's like, it's so weird and experimental. And yeah, just the tiny little shots of them in little boxes, and the stuff of like there's a part where Mio starts drooling, and as the drool drops down her chin, the box extends below to like capture the drool, and just it's one of the most weird ways I've ever seen a sequence filmed effectively and kind of put together visually on screen. It's so bizarre because it's kind of like a mosaic, but you're only seeing one part of the mosaic, and each shot is kind of like what it feels like, and then it starts to slowly get distorted. One of my favorite parts, though, in there is because the dialogue is so good, of this just long shots looking at them with blank expressions, and at one point, I think it's Mio says, "Do you want to play Shiritori?" It's just the Japanese word game where if you say a word that ends with "in," you lose, and he goes like, "Yeah, Mikan." And then it's just they stop. And then that's when they like slowly start going insane. But the pacing of that joke of just this long silence, let's play Shiritori. Okay, long silence, Mikan. And there's no reaction to it at all. And then slowly they start laughing. While they're laughing, they point at Mai, who's just sitting there on the floor or lying on the floor still, and just go, "Ha ha ha, she's dead." Ha 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 ha. And then the last bit is my saying into camera sleep paralysis, and that's when it cuts, and that's the end of that segment. And it probably is actually the weirdest and most insane thing that happened in Nichijou. Certainly for one of the main segments in the show, it is fucking madness. So I knew that would also be on your list, but it is.
Oh yeah, it's pretty up my alley. But also, I cannot escape the thought that this show is as weird as it is because it is happening completely in the minds of 3 girls slowly dying on an abandoned elevator. I feel like that is a legitimate reading of Nichijou.
Absolutely. So that was your number 8. It's going to be my number 7. My number 8. We've already kind of talked about this bit. It's like a little bit more though. My number 8 is Hakusei Nano Meet Crow. This has always been one of my favorite segments of this show, and it just gets funnier every time as like you see all the behind the scenes stuff of like the stunt casting of Ono Daisuke is so funny. But just that whole sequence of this crow and that it's so polite, it's so pleasant, it's so nice, and Sakamoto just is getting more and more distressed by the fact that clearly like he is losing his place in this home, and he has lost his talking scarf to this weird crow that has just shown up and is just taking all this shit. And Crow just sort of has a fun time. They all laugh, and then he decides, you know what, I have to return home. It's like, it's time for me to go. And then the best part is the kicker on the scene is he flies off and he goes, see you again. And then in English, and then writes the words like a jet trail, see you again in the sky as he zooms away. You get Nano and Hakase overlaid on that, like tearfully looking into the sky. He's just saying goodbye. And then it cuts to Sakamoto. He's just like, you still have the scarf. He still has the scarf. And then they never address it again. And Crow is just gone. And weird triangle cartoon Crow Man, which I love that it's just, there's no other bird in the entire show that looks anything like this one weird ass crow. It's fucking great.
It is absolutely fucking great. It was on my list of, I guess we would call them honorable mentions, but things I couldn't quite fit in there, but I love. And there's no wrong list of top 10 segments here. They're all great.
Yeah.
I'm glad it is on yours, so we could talk about it again. Yeah.
All right. So
my number 7 is one that I am pretty sure would be on everybody's list for Nichijou, and it is the principal versus the deer in episode 6. I don't know what else to say. Like, it is just one of the most incredible pieces of animation where they basically have a pro wrestling match. The funniest aspect of it, though, is the framing, which is, it is one of the many, many times on this show where Yuko has done something wrong. Usually it's forgetting her homework, and the teacher makes her go stand out in the hallway, which at a certain point I feel like you need to come up with a new punishment, because this is not working if you're the teacher, clearly. And Yuko is standing out there in the hallway, and she sees the craziest thing anyone has ever or will ever see, which is her principal absolutely fucking getting wrecked and wrecking a deer out in the yard and getting increasingly bizarre. And then she has to go back in and pretend her day is normal. And that is, as funny as the fight is, I do think that framing is the cherry on top.
Yeah. Yes. I'll talk about this segment when it gets to mine, because I don't want the list to get too discombobulated. But yes, it is Principal versus Deer. It is the most iconic scene in Nichijou for a reason. It is like everybody has heard or seen clips from the scene because it is very famous.
It comes at the perfect point. It's episode 6. Yeah. So, like, you're far in enough to have a certain sense of what the show is, but not far in enough to have a sense that the show will do this, right?
Yes.
But I think if you put this in like episode 20, after you'd seen stuff like the elevator scene or some of the Fey Kingdom stuff, it wouldn't hit as hard as it does coming at that exact moment where I feel like this one kind of rips the lid off what Nichijou is to a certain extent. Not that those first 5 episodes are sane. There's plenty of crazy stuff. One of my favorite segments is the next one I'm going to talk about, which is from episode 3. But like, nothing that weird has happened yet. And I think it is the thing that makes you wake up and go, oh, that's what this show is. Okay. Shit.
Yeah, it definitely is the scene that like kind of ups the ante, because I think it's like the first big like combative action scene at the very least. Yeah, it's phenomenal. So my number 7 I've already talked about because I want to just jump to it, which was Stuck in the Elevator. So you get to do another one, Jonathan.
I get to do another one. What is my number 6? Okay, I was just mentioning it. This is from episode 3. This is like, I think, the first segment I fell completely in love with in this show. And it's one of the more mundane ones. It is Yuko walking home, trying to figure out why Mai is mad at her, because Mai won't talk to her. And so Yuko keeps apologizing for things, and they keep getting increasingly ridiculous in her, like, list of sins she has done. And you realize she has treated Mai like absolute fucking dog shit, because it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then and she's just going crazy. It's that classic Nichijou. It's just long, durational, over and over again. And then finally the joke is at the stoplight, she realizes Mai just had headphones in the whole time and wasn't listening. Or if you've seen more of the show and know Mai better, Mai absolutely heard all of that and was just letting Yuko go crazy, because Mai didn't care about any of that stuff, but she wants Yuko to hurt. And so she's letting Yuko pillory herself here. It's incredible.
Yes. Well, because also later throughout that episode, Mai keeps on fucking with, or Mio, Mai keeps on fucking with her. And then that culminates at near the end of that episode is when they have the arm wrestling contest where she just absolutely destroys her. Like over and over and over again, and Yuko keeps on being like, nope. It's like, oh, I wasn't quite ready. It's like, oh, you went a little bit early. It just keeps on getting wrecked and wrecked and wrecked. And I feel like the subtext of that is that Mai is upset about all, like, she burned one of her fucking statues, and all that shit comes out in that. big rant. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So she got something on it and then like put it in the furnace at school and all this stuff. It gets crazy. I can't even remember all the crazy things that happen because it starts with like stealing stuff from her lunch and ends with destroying her life's work. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, that one is very good. It did not make my list, but that is episode 3 is very good. That's a very funny segment. Yeah. My number 6, this one we talked kind of a little bit about, but I've always loved this piece so much. This is from episode 16. This is Yuko tries to order coffee from Daiku Coffee, which quick shout out to the fact that I don't think I remembered this detail, but that all the random stores are all Daiku stores, which is the kid who runs the Go and Soccer Club. He's like rich. His family just owns it's everything. It's every random store they go to, every random product they use, everything is from the Daiku conglomerate. But this is a Takemoto Yasuhiro episode because almost all the best episodes are either him or Kikami Yoshi or Yamada Naoko. At the beginning of that episode, Yuko goes into this sort of fake Starbucks Daiku coffee and tries to order a coffee, but she doesn't know how to do it. And you have the nervous cashier lady there as well, whom we've seen a couple of times. And, you have that very Nichijou distinctive thing of where when people are sort of anxious, they like breathe really heavy and they draw the breath in and they sort of sweat, and both of them are like really nervous and don't know what to do. And Yuko keeps on fucking up the order, and she's just says like, "Oh, can I have like a frappuccino tea?" And she like points to the tea. She's like, "Oh, you want to have a tall?" He says, tall, it's tall. Oh my God, it's tall. And the Yuko voice actress, like, finding every single way to say the word toru in Japanese. And then she goes, "Okay, actually, never mind. I forgot. Really what I wanted was this, but make it short." It's like, "Oh, you want a small one of these?" Like, oh, the S stands for small. Then eventually she switches her order, and then the sizes for the other order is like solo or doppio, and you get the actress for Yuko just saying doppio over and over and over again as she's like anime reacting to the madness of what the fuck is a doppio. But so all that stuff is so funny, and the ridiculous reactions to all the weird particular names that the different orders at a fucking coffee store have for no reason, and different orders have different kinds of sizes that are called different things. You're just like, I don't understand any of this shit. She eventually just orders like a shot of espresso, doesn't know what to do with it, goes and sits down, and the punchline being the guy comes over and it's like the world's smallest shot of espresso that's like 5 centimeters tall, and he puts it down and says, it's like, "Thank you for your order." And she just puts her head in her hands and goes, "It's so small." And then it cuts. And that shot of her just in despair at the table with like this comically tiny shot of espresso. And she's too proud to sort of actually figure out how to order and ask someone for help. It is so funny. I think it just like really captures the feeling of going to a store like that, feeling kind of awkward and socially awkward about it, not wanting to admit that you don't really know what the menu options are or like what any of that shit is because you've never been at this store before, and just trying to sort of like be cool and work your way through it, and then ending up and it's just a complete disaster. And then that joke does get brought up again later where they go back and Yuko is trying to show off being like, I've ordered at this store before, but Mio just like orders like it's nothing, and Yuko's left in despair once again because she actually is just an idiot, doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We have seen, and this was also on my honorable mention, Sean, paired with, there is a precursor to that scene where it is Sakurai Sensei doing it in episode 12, but it's ordering food, and it's also very funny. I love we didn't talk enough about the lady taking the order, who is also a nervous wreck, which is great. But like we have seen in anime and in American shows and movies and all sorts of stuff, the skits about how ridiculous coffee orders are, because it is a universal human experience that coffee shops like to make themselves seem really important by having absolutely crazy order methods. You can't go to Starbucks and say, "I want a large coffee." You have to say grande, or except you can't say grande. Grande means small. You have to see venti. It's all completely insane, and it's meant to make you feel bad about yourself, and it's meant to make them seem important, and it sucks. And so there's a lot of comedy about it. And so it is kind of hard, I think, to do a version of the comedy segment that feels new and fresh, and Nichijou found a way into that. This is the best version of that joke I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's and I think a big part of it is the fact that the shop attendant is also incredibly awkward and nervous. It does not know what to do about this interaction. Like, I think the fact that because it's so true. I've never worked like a restaurant or food service, but I've worked cashier and like registers before. And it's very true that, like, at least in my experience, the person who's working there, especially if you're like relatively new, you're as nervous or more nervous about this very awkward interaction because you know the customer doesn't know what to do, but you have no means of helping them. And you're just like, please let this stop. And you're just sort of, sweating on the inside. But it's all the way that they use the kind of ridiculous anime expression to bring across the internal trauma of trying to order from a stupid shop like that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I love it. My number 5 is going to be a Helvetica Standard segment. I'm glad we could work in because I love
Standard.
I love Helvetica Standard. I think, one, it's a great name for a show, in part because it's hard to search for, because Helvetica Standard also is a font.
Yes.
So if you put it into Google, you won't necessarily get the Nichijou segment. This is the Helvetica Standard from episode 18, where you have this woman. I'm going to read from your notes here, Sean, because you wrote this out. She gets off a train. She's in a country town. She's slowly monologuing. This could be out of like a Ghibli movie or something, like Whisper of the Heart, to herself about this book she wants to read in the library. And she's thanking the anonymous person who donated this book to the library. And it seems very wholesome, like you're going to get like a copy of The Little Prince or something very nice like that, right? But instead she goes in and she opens it, and it is a hollowed out book with a fucking revolver in there, and that is the end of the segment. It is never mentioned again. That's the whole thing, and you just have to imagine the inner life of this very nice country girl going to the library to get a book with a gun inside, like she's fucking John Wick, and she's about to go kill a motherfucker. Oh my god. I considered putting this all the way up at like number 2. I love this segment so much. And of course it is very brief, like all the other Helvetica Standard bits, but this to me is Helvetica Standard at its best.
Yeah, I'm glad you have it on your list. I have it as like, this is my like honorable mention of where I didn't know where to even put it because it's so different than all the other jokes in the show, but it's so funny. It's definitely the funniest Helvetica Standard. There's a couple of other really good Helvetica Standards, like the one that's like a weird zombie man who dropped his glasses and he just goes Megane, 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 while the guy's running away. Helvetica Standard gets weird. This is the weirdest because it's honestly, like, the thing about it that's kind of crazy is keep this bit in the back of your mind, because I swear when we get to fucking Violet Evergarden, the tone of most of this Helvetica Standard is like a fucking episode of, like, the end of an episode of Violet Evergarden where the character that Violet's helped is like monologuing and thinking back on this like moment in their life and the importance of like emotion and all this shit. And it's so similar, the way the monologue is written and delivered and the music, it sounds so like that. It's I think part of the thing that makes it so funny is it's so weird and dreamlike. Like the notion of that there's this weird library that's this rundown, abandoned library that looks like it's from the fucking Last of Us in the middle of the forest in this country town you've never visited. Like, it so is like the beginning of a dream that like, this lady knows this information that this book is there, and there's no possible way she could ever know that. Who has told her this information? Where has that come from? It's so weird, but it's such an evocative scenario. And yeah, as she gets up there and is monologuing about how, like, this book was the book that brought color to her youth, and she grabs the book and it's called The Colors of Autumn is the name of the book, and she just opens it up and it's just a revolver and it hangs on that shot. You have no context. You have no idea. Is she going to shoot herself? Is she going to assassinate somebody? Like, what is going on with this gun? And it never comes up. They never address it. There's like all the style of the entire thing is totally different visually than how any other Helvetica Standard looks. It doesn't have the sort of weird, chaotic Helvetica Standard music of like the thing then in the background. It's insane, and I'm very glad you have that one on your list because it's just one of the weirdest but funniest jokes. It's one where I had totally forgotten about it. And then when it happened, I had to pause because I was like, how did I forget this joke was in here? And I just had to pause to laugh for a while before I could go on because I couldn't watch the show because I was laughing too hard.
Yeah, it took me aback because it is so shocking and bizarre and out of, even for this show.
Yes.
Because again, we're also like pretty deep into the show. What is that? That's episode 18, I think. Yeah, we're pretty deep. You think you know the curveballs Nichijou has for you at this point, and that has to be one of the biggest gasp curveballs in the whole show.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then if you want to, you can Google around about it and see people have like, or try to like have theories they've put together of like, what does this mean? Like, what is the deeper meaning of this Helvetic standard segment? It's like, it's like, it's like if Nichijou did David Lynch. Like, that's what that scene feels like. It's very bizarre. All right, so let's see. Now we're on to my number 5. My number 5, we've already talked about a bit. It's Principal versus Deer from episode 6. Which just one thing I want to shout out. That is a Kigami Yoshiji episode. And that whole episode is phenomenal. And that bit is amazing. In fact, since we already talked about that bit and you talked about it, I don't think I have a lot to add because I think you did a good job of breaking down the thing that makes it so funny isn't necessarily just the principal fighting the deer. It's watching Yuko watch that happen.
Yes.
That's the thing that makes it funny. But I want to actually shout out another joke from that and take this opportunity to talk about the beginning of that episode is this whole crazy sequence where Yuko and Mio in class are playing picture shiritori, where they're drawing pictures that have like an English word of what the picture is at the bottom and passing it back and forth. And Yuko keeps on fucking it up and like doing the wrong thing. So like she draws a picture of a tengu, which is a Japanese yokai with like a crow monster, and passes it over, but in English she accidentally spelled it as Tengo. So Mio looks is like, it's a Tengo, and so she draws Goku, and Yuko looks is like, why did you like stun Wukong Goku from Journey to the West? And Yuko's like, ha ha ha, Mio, you idiot, like why would you draw Goku? Tengu starts with Gu, not Go. But the best part of that is that eventually it gets to Yuko's drawn a taxi, and she passes it to Mio, but she spelled taxi with a Y, and Mio's voice actress has this all-time great delivery where she goes, that doesn't say taxi, that says taxi with a Y. And it's just fucking weird. So that bit is also very good. It's not as good as Principal versus Deer, but we talked about Principal versus Deer, so I wanted to mention that one too. I'm
glad you did. It is also great. All right. So that was your number 5. So my number 4, I don't even know what to call this one. This is the one in episode 22 that starts with Hakase decides she's going to take Sakamoto the cat on a walk.
Jonathan, this is my number 4 also. I'm assuming you're talking about Hakase and the dogs?
Yes.
Is what I've called it.
But here's the thing, Sean. This one starts with, one, you don't take cats on walks. So Hakase is a crazy person. But you also don't take anyone on a walk with a fucking noose, which is what she's created. She's tied a noose around Hakase and isn't walking Hakase, or Sakamoto. Hakase is just dragging him on the pavement. And before you even get to the actual meat of this segment, which is the dogs, this was already in my top 10, Sean. I had noted it in my notes because the image and Minoru Shiraishi's performance and everything of Hakase just dragging Sakamoto behind her cheerfully with a noose is so good. And then it expands into they get cornered by all these seemingly totally nice dogs who are obviously not going to hurt them, but because Sakamoto is a cat and Hakase is a crazy little girl, they're both afraid of the dogs. Yuko and Mio come in and it culminates with them getting bit by the dogs, including the shot where Yuko gets bit. It has to be the single most elaborate 3D shot KyoAni has ever done, at least to date, maybe in their later shows. But from everything we've seen so far, it's a fucking UFO table shot of just flying through the city in and around her to arrive at the point where she's been bitten by the dog. And then, of course, the rest of the segment, they are both on the ground, writhing in agony. And it's incredible, the whole thing. But I want to stress, even if it was just Hakase dragging Sakamoto around with her noose/leash, that would be enough to get it somewhere in the top 10. Add all that other stuff in, it's number 4. Amazing segment.
It's so funny, yeah. And obviously the pieces of animation where Yuko is bit, And you have the big sweeping shot that comes in and she shoots the laser into the sky because, when I just love the idea that, like, the pain is so intense that the way you express it is they just fire a fucking laser from their mouth. Then you have Mio does it and she fires it into, like, this building that goes shooting off into the clouds. Like, that stuff is so funny. For me, my actual favorite part of this joke, though, is what happens afterwards. Because you have then Mai comes up, because it's Mai's dogs, her weird fucking freaking out dogs, with the one dog that's like the little dog that just sort of like slaps back and forth. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. He just is on his two weird legs and just sort of like slaps back and forth like a weird like sausage or some shit. But there's a running joke through the whole show that culminates here, where it specifically with Yuko, when she gets like hurt or disappointed or something like bad happens and she's despondent, this Shiba Inu named Buddy comes running up and puts his fucking paw on Yuko's back in like a reassuring gesture. And there's just this joke where that just keeps on happening. And there's this little boy that Buddy keeps running away from. And the little boy just is like, Buddy, no, Buddy, where are you going? And Buddy rushes over and finds Yuko and puts his paw on her back. Well, in this one, you've got Yuko and Mio are both on the ground, like, quivering in pain. And Hakase and Sakamoto are basically crying. And then you have Buddy, the dog, run up. And then there's a little tiny Buddy named just Little Buddy. So it's Buddy and Little Buddy. And Buddy puts his paw on Yuko, and Little Buddy puts his paw on Mio. And the boy is chasing after them, and he shows up. He's just like, what the fuck is even happening here? And that's the ending of that bit. And I think that's the last time you see Buddy. Maybe he pops up again in the last couple episodes. But it's such a good payoff to this weird running gag about this dog that just wants to, be there for Yuko when bad shit happens. And apparently he had another little buddy that's named Little Buddy.
It's so good. Oh, man. Yeah. No, I love it. I love this scene. It's so great. And these top 5 are all very competitive. I'll just say that. So that was your number 4 and my number 4, so it's my number 3 now. My number 3, I'm cheating and I'm tying 3 together, but I think it's fair because it is the Fae Kingdom sequences. So we have them from episode 7, 18, and 21, so they stretch across the whole show. These are these surreal fantasy dream sequences that basically are in a Studio Ghibli-style airship. Like, in episode 7 in particular, it's very clearly a reference to Castle in the Sky, because that is how Laputa opens, is with the airship that the princess is on and all of that, and it's very clearly a reference to that. And I love these scenes. I particularly I have to tell the story of watching episode 7, because episode 7 is the one I mentioned earlier that I watched on Crunchyroll, not on the Blu-ray, because I was over at my brother's house, didn't have the Blu-rays, we wanted to watch a Nichijou, so we fire up Crunchyroll and start this episode, and both our immediate reaction was, did you start the right show? Because they play the joke so firmly, where there's no theme song, there's none of the normal, like, Nichijou messaging around it. If we just jump into this Ghibli-ass sequence about this fantasy in the sky, and she's got the 2 wooden cubes that can, activate the ancient weapon underground and all this stuff. And for the first couple minutes, I was like, oh, wait, just double check. No, this is Nichijou. And it goes on, and it's like half that fucking episode. Yes. They just play it so straight. And then the payoff, of course, is the dropping the wooden cubes out, and then they fall onto Mio, and that is when Yuko wakes up, and the source of the dream was Mio right in front of her with her 2 cubes in her hair. And that's brilliant. But that's not even the best one, because I think each one-ups the one from before. Yes. I love all of them. We already talked about, because it was earlier on your list, the one from episode 21, where you have the big fight sequence with Joji Nakata, Hochi Otsuka, and Akio Otsuka. But then also the one in episode 18, where they're all having to do the jokes, and the princess is like dropping them out through the sky, is great. But the best part of the one, and this is probably my favorite gag in all 3 of these, is in episode 18, is they're all trying to make the princess laugh. And one of the guys is dressed as a cheerleader and has these 2 blue pom-poms. Yes. And the way we get back into reality is he gets ejected from the sky plane, or the blimp, falls down, and then those just seamlessly, it is such a phenomenal piece of animation, falls to earth where the 2 pom-poms become the 2 braids on Mio's hair, and that is what Yuko sees when she wakes up, and then says her normal line, "I'll go out and stand in the hall." Yes. And it is so amazing. It is for one, I think it is like There's something relatable about how violent the jump from dream to reality is when you're in a disconcerting setting like a classroom. As someone who has spent a lot of his time in life sleeping in classes, I really relate to Yuko. Again, I am a Yuko. I relate to her intensely in these scenes, and I just love that escalation from it being the 2 wooden cubes in the first scene to it being the pom-poms becoming the braids in this one. It blew me away. I love these. Edit these 3 together into like a 30-minute OVA, and it's one of the best ever made. It's so good.
It's so fucking funny. I think one of my favorite bits is in the second one. They have like the one guy who they keep on hyping up. It's like, oh, he's like the joke meister. You know, it's like he's so funny. Like he's going to be able to do it. And he comes out with like a swan-shaped tutu thing on that's supposed to be, you know, it kind of looks like a dick because the swan neck is extending from where his crotch is. And it's supposed to be like, haha. And he comes out and she just immediately presses the button and he falls through and they're like, I can't believe, like, even number 42 or whatever it is, like, even he couldn't do it. Who's next? Oh, it's number 36. And they turn around and number 36 is standing there and he's got the same fucking tutu on. And it was just like, oh, and it's very fucking funny. God, yeah, all 3 of those sequences are amazing, and yeah, it's just so good, the escalation, because as you say, in the first one, it's a long time into that first one until something so ridiculous happens that you realize, oh, this is a joke, and like this is like they're just playing it very straight, and then in each subsequent one, obviously it's more and more surreal and just more and more bizarre. Yeah, I love those segments also. And I think it is fair for you to sort of just put all 3 of them as one, because, yes, they're all like kind of, all those jokes build on each other.
Yep. All right, that was my number 3. So your number 3.
So my number 3, this is also from a Kigami Yoshiji episode. This is from episode 20. This is a very long sequence. I'm just putting all of it here as just one thing of Yuko and my quote-unquote help Mio with her manga. This is like really, it's most of episode 20 is like interspersed bits of this whole segment. It's so good. This is where you get the whole sequence where one of the intros to the sequence is the bit you talked about earlier where Yuko hits the mechanical pencil, but she has it flipped around, so she presses into her thumb and she screams in pain. And you basically, it's like, you know, fucking fighting Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII, where the entire solar system gets obliterated, and the laser like passes past Jupiter, and then it, you know, zooms out, and Jupiter slowly becomes the bead of blood on her thumb. So that's like the intro to this, is that fucking whole thing. But then you have all the stuff where Yuko's trying to deal with the fact she spilled ink all over the drawing, and while she's in the background trying to deal with that, fucking Mai is just doing the most psychopathic shit where she's just drawing all over and like random shit into her manga, and just like here's just like a random face in the background, and then here's like, oh, I've changed the background to be just a cemetery with like a ghost floating around, and she just keeps on drawing more and more ridiculous shit until eventually she draws a parody of Momotaro, the Japanese legend of the boy from the peach. That's like an old couple who come across a peach in the middle of the road, and the peach splits open, and it's just like a private second-class soldier who's just sitting there in the peach, and like Mai just explains it step by step. And I think this is the point where like Mio just asks like, why are you drawing there? Like, why are you drawing in these spaces? And Mai just looks at her and says, because there's a blank space there. That's why I draw there. And so then Mio kicks her out. Then you have all the stuff with Yuko trying to sort of like fix like all of her bullshit. But then one of the best parts is that all wraps around to the very end of the episode, where the last thing in the episode is Mio just having this absolute meltdown, shouting at Yuko about Yuko, who was supposed to go buy new paper to replace the paper. And Yuko had done all of these random little jokes and like kept on distracting from going to get the paper. And you missed all the scenes. So it's just Mio explaining all the things that Yuko did to fuck around. It's like, you know, kind of like summarizing a whole Nichijou skit you didn't actually see. But then the punchline of that is that ultimately Yuko did get the paper. She just hasn't told Mio yet. So Yuko keeps on trying to stop her to tell her, no, but I did get the paper though. I ultimately got the paper for you. And Mio just keeps on shouting her down. She's like, no, and then you did this. Oh, but that wasn't enough, was it? Oh no. Then you also had to do this, you fucker. She's like, but I got that. Okay.
And she's holding the paper the whole time through this entire scene, because this was so close to being on my top 10, Sean.
Yeah.
I just didn't quite know how to break it out of the rest of the episode. But this part in particular I love, because it's a sequel to an earlier argument sequence they have where similar things happen. But the size of it, where it is Mio just has to go and go and go, recounting basically a whole episode's worth of skits where Yuko has done these just psychotic pranks on her over and over. But with that extra cherry on top of her, just visible in the scene, holding the manga paper right there, and Mio never opens her eyes to even look, let alone listen, until the very end. Mwah. It's so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. And again, like it's all like the whole episode basically is just this skit, and then there's a couple of stuff with Nano and Sakamoto in Hakase that's also very funny, because that's the one where they play hide and go seek, and Sakamoto goes shabba dabba doo because he's so excited to play games. But other than that section, it's basically just this sort of like manga thing and all the different pieces of it. But it's so incredibly funny. Like 90% of that episode is just in Mio's room, and it's just legendarily good.
Yeah, no, love. That's probably my maybe third favorite episode, if I'm saying 17 and 25 are my two favorites. But speaking of 17, my number 2, this is what makes episode 17 my favorite episode. It is the silent, well, there's music, but no dialogue sequence of the girls trying to finish their house of cards over at the Shinonome or I don't know, the Nano is with them. I don't think they're at Shinonome's place, but they're under the like heated
kotatsu
rug around the kotatsu. I almost said tonkatsu. That would be different. That would be under the pork cutlet. Under the tonkatsu. See, I did it. The kotatsu.
Yakisoba da yo! Yakisoba jirai, yakisoba da yo!
Anyway, but I just think on the level of pure visual construction and cinematic grammar, this might be like the most accomplished bit in the whole show for me, is just it's like Fantasia-esque or like Silly Symphony-esque, where there is this piece of music. It is the absolute height of that quality of this composer, where it sounds like kind of high and classical over this ridiculous shit of they have their house of cards almost built. They just have to add the last two pieces on the top, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse until eventually the entire like lighting unit falls down on top of the table, and the end is them just putting them there sadly defeated. But I think this scene, like, you can pull this out, show it to anybody. It's just perfect. It transcends all linguistic borders because it has no dialogue whatsoever. It is just music and visuals, and it is perfect.
Yeah, like I didn't make my list because I didn't even know how to compare it, because it's so different than any other Nichijou segment. Because it is, I mean, I have in my notes, it's a Looney Tunes short, you know, like it's completely in that style, and it is so phenomenal. But it's just a very different kind of humor. But there's like a reason why it grabbed my attention, you know, all those years ago before I'd seen the show, because it is so distinctive. It's a purely musical based short with no dialogue whatsoever, and yeah, like just it's the sense of tension as they're trying to put the things up, and the punchline at the end of the lamp or whatever at the ceiling has disconnected and fallen and crushed everything on the table, and they're both just sort of like, you know, quivering, and Yuko slowly puts the last two cards and just puts it on top of the lamp thing, and then Mio just puts her head in her hands like oh, Yuko, like, no, Yuko, like, Yuko's lost her mind, and Mio's just, you know, weeping for her friend who's just completely lost it, because what's the point of putting the two cards on? It's all destroyed. It's all over.
It's so good. And while we're here, let me just explain fully why episode 17 is my favorite. You have that segment. You have the crow segment that you talked about earlier.
Yes.
That's so amazing. And you have the best stuff with Nakamura, the science teacher, where I also considered just doing a giant Tide like entry that's just all of Nakamura's segments throughout the show, because they're all great. But in this one, this is the best one, because this is where there's the multi-part behind the gymnasium segment, where she digs several holes behind the gymnasium and then sends a letter off to Shinonome trying to get her to come, Nano to come and like fall in the hole. But instead she first gets the Mohawk boy and then for some reason shaves off his Mohawk because she's cruel. This is also one episode after she electrocuted Mohawk boy seemingly to death with Mr. Short Circuit, which is fucking phenomenal.
Yes.
But then another person comes and it is I think it's one of the other, it's like the male teacher comes and falls in. You have the girl with the big bow in her hair come and fall in.
Well, what happens here is you have a whole elaborate skit, which is a sequel to an earlier skit where Red Ribbon Girl comes up to Takasaki Sensei, the male teacher, and she tells him something ridiculous that happens, and they have this back and forth where they both react and go, eh! And then, so she's like, Nakanoja's fallen in a pit behind the gym. It's like, oh, no, he hasn't. It's like, no, listen to me very carefully. Nakanojo has not fallen in a pit. She goes, It's like, but someone shaved his hair. Well, draw it back in. And they just like go back and forth. And eventually he goes to go there. Then it cuts to another skit. Then it comes back, and they've both just fallen in the holes. And the best part is that the Takasaki Sensei is just like, where are we? What's going on? Where am I? What's happening? He's just like in this weird robot kind of voice, like he's like a cat who you put a bag over and just doesn't even know what to do, like the world has disappeared. It's like, am I somewhere? What's going on? Where are we? What's happening? And that's all happening. It's fucking madness.
It's so good. And then part 3 of that skit is Nano does finally come. She falls in, but because she has her key, the key hits the ground and she doesn't fall in that far and can pull herself out. So the key saves her. Fantastic. Such a great payoff to that joke. And episode 17 also has one of my favorite Mai bits, which is this whole skit where Yuko determines that she's not going to let Mai get to her today and all of that. And Mai keeps doing all these crazy things, and Yuko is trying to resist. And I don't want to go through all of it, but it ends with this great moment where she comes to peace and like apologizes, and she has the line, "Yes, this is how it should be. This is my path, and this is Mai's path." And I laughed so hard at the over dramatic nature of all of that. It's great.
Yeah, because it's the, I put in my notes, it's the Tsukomi heard around the world, because the whole thing is like her, she doesn't want to give the comedic retorts to all the weird dumb shit that Mai does, and then eventually she gives in, and because the thing is that Mai gets picked by the teacher to read from the textbook. Mai stands up, holds the textbook out at full arm's length. She has a manga there, and she's looking at a manga that's folded inside the textbook, but she's reading the text of the textbook perfectly. And so that's where Yuko just screams out, "What, has she memorized it?" And that like Tsukomi turns it, it's like it pans over like the whole planet as people look up into the sky.
Yes.
It's fucking amazing.
So that is all of that together is why episode 17 is my favorite episode, but my number 2 segment of the whole show is the House of Cards sequence. Sean, what is your number 2?
All right, my number 2, this one is incredibly good, is from episode 16. This is when the police try to check Mio's bag for counterfeit money. This whole, like, the way this whole bit escalates is just fucking incredible. Because this is probably in the competition for one of my favorite episodes, because this is the same episode that also has the whole coffee shop joke. But the whole setup of the policeman comes up is like, hey, we've had reports of someone with a beige tote bag and a red line on it who's been using counterfeit bills. And then it just so happens that Mio has the exact same bag, and Yuko's with her, and Yuko's like, ha ha ha, Mio, isn't that a funny coincidence? But Mio's standing there with her arms outstretched like she's ready to have her handcuffs put on her, and which leads to one of the low-key funniest lines in the show to me, which Yuko sees that and then try to pass it off to the police officer. She says, no, she's just getting ready in case a random volleyball comes by. It's such a good line. But anyways, the whole bit is that she's got the BL manga pages in her bag. She doesn't want anyone to see, so she's trying desperately to like get no one to notice. So she takes a fucking bill out, puts it on the ground, and does a dogiza, like a bow, like head on the ground. And the police officer goes, what is that, a counterfeit bill? And she says, no, it's not counterfeit, it's real and it's a bribe. Please just walk away. And the guy's like, no, you're gonna have to show me what's in the bag. He grabs the bag. She goes, it's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. It's a relative's. It's a relative's. And then, of course, the pages come out. They see it. And that's when, in my notes, I just describe it as the demon is unleashed, because that's when Mio just loses her mind and just beats the shit out of all of them. She, like, karate chops the police officer, jumps into the air to grab all the pages, counting in English. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She then sees Yuko is standing there with the 6th page. Yuko's laughing. Mio then grabs Yuko's leg and does this whole pro wrestling move where she grabs the leg and does this like corkscrew twist and slams her on the ground. Then fucking Sasahara Senpai's goat walks up and is chewing on one of the pages. She does the same wrestling move to the fucking goat. And that like everything is completely destroyed. Mio just stands there with her head in her hands just going, ugh, ugh, ugh. As like a guy walks up, I think it's the Afro dude walks up and just goes, what the hell is this? And Sasahara Senpai gets his goat, and the goat is like, barely walking. He's just like, oh, what's wrong with you, Kojiro? You're like a newborn fawn. And that's the end of that bit. And it's just the insane escalation in every step along the way. It's so fucking funny, and I just love all the little lines in there. No, officer, she's just waiting for a volleyball to come by, or no, it's not counterfeit, it's real and it's a bribe. It's incredibly good.
Yeah, no, it rocks. I love that entire scene. I also love that is a scene you could not do in an American show, because in an American show, someone beating the shit out of a cop would have a different valence and a different ending. Let's just say that. So, but I love that scene. It's fantastic. All right.
So what's your number one, Jonathan?
Moment of choice. I thought long and hard, and ultimately my heart comes back to the segment I cannot stop thinking about. This is less than 30 seconds long. It is not elaborate in any way, but it is so perfect to me. I have it in my notes here just as domestic violence. This is from episode 19, where we have... from episode 19, where we have Fei-chan, who is the little orange-haired girl with her 2 friends, and they're standing in the rain. Well, they're standing under like a canopy at a bus stop in the rain. And she says, never before and never again will anyone ever do what I'm about to do. And then she runs out, stands in the rain, does a little like moe squat and says, domestic violence, and then runs back and says, how was it? And they say, how are we supposed to respond to that? And I rewound this several times. I took a video of it and put it on Twitter. This to me is like the moment that just so encapsulates what Nichijou is to me, which is that it's a show made by crazy people. And, you got to give it to Fei-chan. Truly, I don't think anyone before, and probably ever again, unless they're imitating this show, has ever just run out in the rain, shouted domestic violence, and ran back to their friends. But it happened on Nichijou, and that's what makes Nichijou special.
Yeah, that is an incredibly funny bit. My favorite part of it is like when she's running back, she's like, like it's like like a cliche high school girl who doesn't want to get rained on, like as if she did just like sort of calmly walk out there, say domestic violence. It's just like, oh no, I'm in the rain. Yeah. That one is very good. I love Fei-chan, like that whole bit, like her and Weboshi and the tsundere girl. Do you get a lot more of in the second half of the show? There's a lot of good stuff with that trio. That's very, very funny. So then that leads to my number one. My number one has been my number one since I first watched this show. This is, to me, one of the funniest bits of like anything I've ever watched. I think it's just like, it totally gets my sense of humor, which is Mio inventing the torpedo high jump. So this is the whole elaborate sequence in episode 19 where Mio's trying to do the high jump to clear that bar. But every time she does it, she like does this weird angled torpedo jump that goes underneath it. And Yuko gets very frustrated and decides to help her. And you just have this incredibly elaborate, super long, big, dramatic sports movie training montage that is playing underneath it is the song Headlight Taillight by Nakajima Miyuki, which is this gorgeous song that is just about like because basically, I mean, the only lyrics you get for most of it are in the chorus, the headlight, tail light, tabi wa mada waranai. Like, the journey is still going on. The journey has not yet ended. And that just quietly plays underneath and slowly ramps up as you get all these images of, through the years, Yuko has tried to help Mio do different sports stuff. And so, but when Mio tells you, he's like, well, I'm fairly athletic. The only problem is when you put rules on it, something goes wrong. And so there's like a shot of her that playing soccer, and she just grabs the ball and tucks it under her arm and sprints, and Yuko's chasing after her. It's like, no, Mio, no, we're playing soccer. She's on the fucking like gymnastics bar and is spinning sideways like a propeller for some reason. All this weird shit. And Mio slowly realizes that Yuko has been there with her through all of it, that Yuko has been a true friend and is really trying to help her. You get this big inspirational speech to herself about how, like, I've got to try, I got to be there. If Yuko's going to help me, like, I can push past this. Probably my favorite bit in the whole thing is there's this little scene where Mio's like despondent, where she's just been trying, and she says, hey, Yuko, let's take a little break. And she goes and sort of, hugs her knees on the side in the shadows in the evening with like the sunlight, the orange sunlight peeling in. And then this guy steps up from behind her and it cuts to him. And I have to assume this is a more specific reference if you know some like Japanese movie or something, but it just is sort of like reads as sort of cliche 70s, 80s sports movie coach guy. And he's just standing there with these big sideburns and this like great fucking look. And he just looks at her and says, great effort will always be rewarded. And then that's when you cut to the whole scene of her actually trying to do it. She tries to do the jump. She takes a step, and then she torpedoes directly into Yuko's stomach. Yuko gets launched. She lands on the ground. Yuko gets up pissed off. Mio has no idea what's happening. Yuko torpedoes into Mio, sends Mio flying into the air. She dramatically goes over the bar, lands on the mat, and that's when the narrator tells us that this was the day that the torpedo flop was invented. And it is the weirdest, most excessively overly dramatic scene in this fucking show. And it's just the editing and the imagery and all that shit is absolutely perfect. The song is incredible. The random sports movie dude who is there for no reason whatsoever with his fucking 70s pants and all his giant sideburns. It's so fucking funny. It is like exactly my sense of humor. And I've just watched this clip so many times online. I love it to death.
It's amazing. Was that song written for the show?
No.
Okay.
It's like a classic, great 80s crooning 70s or Japanese song. Like that singer is quite famous. So it's like they got this like real gem of a song to play for this episode, which makes it so much better.
It does. It absolutely makes it better. Oh my God. It's fantastic. Also, I just want to say, by way of an honorable mention, and maybe we can share some other honorable mentions, I'm looking through your image gallery for the episode that's from, episode 19, and I realized episode 19 has another one of my favorite beats, which is one of the weirdest gags on the show, because it involves no people, but it is at a temple, and there are all the little, like, prayer placards that you write your prayer on, and then you hang them up, right? And there's the series of ones where you start on one that says, I want to pass my exams, a very normal thing you'll see here, and then it pans down and says, the guy above, I hope he passes his exams. And then it's to the left of that, it's like, the guy to the right, I hope he passes his exams. And then you go one of it's like, the person below, I hope they pass their exams. And then it zooms out, and it's this just circle of little prayer placards that are, I hope everyone passes their exams. I don't know what it is, that one tickles me, I fucking love it.
I think that's one of the love-like bits.
Right.
Yeah, that one's very funny. That episode also, while I'm looking at my image gallery, has one of my favorite bits also, which is Yuko and the girls get caught out in this sudden rainstorm while they're outside the temple. And it's just, one of my favorite shots in this whole show is this shot of the three girls sitting on the steps of the temple with the rain coming down and their faces just blank and their arms folded all in the same pose. And I think it just captures so perfectly the energy of you're outside, you're like having a good day, and then all of a sudden this massive rainstorm hits and you're just like, fuck. This is what it is now, I guess. This is what my day is. Oh God, that's also the episode that ends with the Go plus soccer match, which is one of the weirdest things ever been put to television.
That is also in my honorable mentions. This was like my number 11 or 12, which is the big Go Plus soccer scene. It's basically, we'd gotten glimpses of along the way of what, because we haven't even talked about Go Plus soccer, that at the beginning it's just this stupid club that this guy created, and this girl who maybe has a crush on him is there. And it's the Daiku guy, right, who has the fortune, and he's just chilling in his Go Plus soccer club. And the joke, of course, is that that's hilarious because those are two things that cannot be mixed. But then we find out there is a whole world of Go Plus soccer that has absolutely been mixed, and this episode is where we basically get the glimpse of the full sports anime Go Plus Soccer, an anime that I think, frankly, KyoAni owes us. I want the 12-episode season of Go Plus Soccer, but there's that one moment as there's the people on the sidelines watching, and they're both, the people playing are like balancing the ball and the go pieces, and the line that just made me lose it here was, they're trying to become the sun.
Yes.
Just made me fucking lose it.
Because, you have this random dude, I think his name is Ogi, because he's like in a couple of those bits, and he shows up and he's like, he's from like a long line of referees or some shit for Go Plus Soccer. So he tries to referee it, and it's, the joke is it's parodying that kind of sports anime where someone has to explain what all the weird rules are and what's going on because nobody knows the sport. It's like if you're watching fucking Hikaru no Go or something, and who knows how Go actually works, and so you have like these very dramatic reveals. You don't really understand what's happening. It's that bit is very, very funny.
Another bit in my runners-up that I had to... This isn't even a segment, so it wouldn't even really... It's just one moment in an episode, but it's in episode 14 where Nano is getting ready to go to school for the first day, and Hakase is making sure she has Nano is making sure she has everything, and Hakase comes in and says, "You forgot something," and Nano wonders what it is, and Hakase says, "Feeling hungry?" and then holds up and goes, "Snickers!"
It's an actual Snicker. It's an actual Snicker bar.
And to the point that in the credits of the episode, the Snickers logo shows up because they licensed it. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's in the end credits is the Snickers logo, and it is this just amazing one shot of Hakase holding aloft the Snickers bar. Phenomenal.
Yeah, that one is phenomenal. There's a bunch of really good gags. One of my favorites, I don't remember which episode it's in. That's in my notes somewhere. There's one of the Helvetica standards I love is there's one with like this boy on like Christmas Eve, and Santa comes in and Santa takes out like a melon bread little package, and the boy's super excited. He takes out the melon pan thing, and then the boy just slaps it against the wall in anger. And that's just the whole joke, and it's like so random, but it's incredibly funny.
Yeah, that one was in my notes as one of my favorites from whatever episode that was in. I love the old man we meet several times who has a comically terrible life. The first big segment of this is in I think he's maybe the vice principal or something, but we see him at home. Yeah. And it's episode 11 where he just has the list of all the stuff of like his wife's out of town, so he hasn't been getting dinner, and he just lists all the things that are terrible about his life. And it ends with him meeting his grandson, who comes over and gives him a dango made out of dirt, but is trying to tell him it's chocolate. And we repeat that a couple of times, the dynamic where he wants to have a nice interaction with his grandson, and his grandson is just a little shit, and it's great.
Yeah, because the kid's like, "No, eat it, but eat it though, like really eat it." Yeah, and it's really fucked up. Yeah, because that's the vice principal. Yeah, there's a bit like that in episode 16 where he's playing catch with Michan, who's the grandson, and Michan like throws the ball, and it's like this crazy sinker pitch that like changes direction midair, and vice principal guy like barely catches it, and he just goes, "A sinker." It's very funny. I love the whole dynamic. There's only a couple bits like it, but there's a lot of little small bits where the vice principal is like secretly trying to get the principal's job, and so he's made like a voodoo doll of the principal and shit like that. And you have the best one is like at the end where this is at episode 26 where the vice principal has replaced the statue of the principal with his statue, and the principal's just there like, what the fuck has happened? And that leads ultimately to a bit that's maybe one of the funniest shots in the whole show, where Nakamura sensei is spying on all the Nano and all this stuff with these binoculars, and then she spots the principal standing in the little indentation where the statue used to be. So he physically is standing where his statue is supposed to be, just like sort of rock still, and Nakamura sees that and just starts freaking out. There are too many good bits in the show to honestly be able to summarize.
Well, like, we haven't talked about, like, the things that are cool segment and how much I love that.
Yes.
My favorite one is episode 12, where you have them talking about the super ball, which is the bouncy ball. And it is just because of the just ludicrously detailed animation on that ball and its physics that makes it so funny. My other favorite thing we haven't mentioned about the things that are cool segment is that you said earlier, Sean, that that's where Yuko and Mio do that. Mai is in those,
Yes.
not paying attention and reading her book because she doesn't care about the things that are cool, which is part of what makes it so funny. I love in episode 13, there are two great Yuko segments. There's her doing her magic act and failing because she's got a cold and she keeps losing all her magic. But then there's also a thread throughout that whole episode of Yuko bragging about getting 80 points on a test. And she keeps doing it through all the recurring segments where they do the miracle time segment. And the miracle is that she got 80 points. They do things that are cool. And the thing that is cool is that she got 80 points. And then at the end, the teacher reveals the average was 92.
Yes.
And that is where we cut to credits. It's so fucking good.
So good. Oh my god. Yeah, that's incredible. Something I love of this show is, you do also have like a lot of stuff I find very good that's like not necessarily super funny. Like one of my favorite little bits in the show now that I'm a teacher is there's the one love like, which is the teacher, and she's like a kindergarten teacher or something, and all the kids are taking a test, and she's like, okay, you've got 10 seconds left to finish, and she starts counting down from like 10, 9, 8, and as she slowly gets, like, the space between the seconds gets longer and longer as she sees there's one kid starting to finish, and I saw that, and it's like, I think this might be the first time I've watched the show since I became a high school teacher, and I'm like, oh my god, I do that. Like every teacher actually does that. I don't know if Keiichi has ever actually been a teacher or something, and he just knows, or he's observed something that his teachers do, but I never thought, I was like, oh shit, that's 100% true. You absolutely do that. It's why I don't use often like an actual timer on the screen, is so that I can cheat it a little bit for like the one kid who's a little bit slower in the class to finish their test. So there's a lot of little stuff like that. I'm trying to think of some of my others. Oh, there's this is a funny one. I love maybe one of the all-time great Helvetica standards is it's one of the last episodes. Is the one where it's the two high school girls, and the one girl says, hey, tell me who you like. Tell me who you like. I don't know. Look, if you tell me who you like, I promise I won't tell anyone else. If I tell anyone else, I'll pay you $1 million. She just goes, okay. Well, the thing is, I like Takeshi-kun. And the other girl turns around and is like, hey, everyone, she likes Takeshi. And she takes out a giant wad of bills and just slaps it on her desk. That is so fucking funny. That's amazing.
It's so good. Oh my god. This show rocks, Sean. I said, maybe not my favorite as much as it is yours, but I do love it. I love talking about it. I love remembering all these segments. And it's truly singular. I think you can truly say there has never been another show like it before or since. I don't think there could be, and that's frankly true of several shows we've watched this season, Sean, like Haruhi, Lucky Star. These are very unique shows, but this one especially, there is no other Nichijou. Even though the word Nichijou is in the titles of 50 other shows, which sometimes makes this hard to search for, but it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it is like Nichijou, it's like, the great prank it's played on the entire anime industry is exactly that. That, like, there are 1,000 shows that have the word Nichijou in the title because it's such a sort of standard of the genre of daily life nonsense. And Nichijou is, like, better than basically any of those shows and is also unlike any of those shows in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it is a completely singular thing. And KyoAni, at least in terms of stuff I've watched, KyoAni has never made anything remotely like this ever again. Honestly, didn't make anything quite like it before other than parts of Lucky Star. It is a bizarre and incredible beast.
Absolutely. And is that it? Can we wrap up, or is there anything else you wanted to say about Nichijou before we sign off for today?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I have any. Oh no, let's end the conversation with this, because I think this is an interesting thing to kind of wrap up with, is talking about the reception of it in terms of when it originally came out and why it wasn't successful, because I think this is kind of like an interesting thing to think about, which is that it's like it was like the wrong show for the moment. I think it's very interesting to see the show in its time, looking back on it, where I was shocked to learn that this show had a radio promotional thing and like character CDs and drama CDs and stuff, because it's not a Nichijou show in the sense of like, it's not a daily life anime. It's not a moe anime. It's not like the kinds of things that were popular at this time. It's not like K-On! And it's very interesting to see that the fact that they tried to market it that way, and tried to, fit it in that kind of moe anime shaped hole that was all the rage, particularly in the early 2010s when this was coming out in 2011. And it just could not find a market in that capacity because it just doesn't make sense. It is not a surprise to me that this show did not sell the Blu-rays well, because it's just not that kind of show. Like, I can't imagine someone going and buying a Yuka wall poster and a Mio figure for their desk. It's just not that kind of thing. And so it makes so much sense to me that where this show actually found kind of success in Japan at the time was airing on Saturday night evenings at like 6 to 6:30 on a like big mainstream channel that like kids and teens could watch, because that is who this show really should be for. As weird and bizarre as it is, it to me is like, it exists in the company for like a Western equivalent of something like a SpongeBob SquarePants or Ed, Ed and Eddie or Courage the Cowardly Dog or any of those kinds of stranger, more bizarre, more surreal cartoons. And it just is not a moe K-On! Type show. And that's great, but it's also like not the thing the market wanted at the time, particularly for late night anime. And so I think it's very fascinating looking at Nichijou in its historical context that like, yeah, of course it didn't sell well. Like, I can't imagine in that market how this show could have possibly performed like even like moderately well, because it's just not built for the market that existed for anime at the time.
It's also just, it's a weird beast as a TV show to begin with. I mean, I was thinking about this. I ultimately think this is the right format for this show, and I love how they have internally structured episodes with all the ways we talked about earlier. But, like, you can also imagine a version of this that is runs half as long and is 15-minute episodes that there are 52 of instead. You can imagine it now, I think, as kind of an ONA, a la some other stuff that they've even made, like the Haruhi-chan shorts or something, that, like, is little pieces released daily or something. Obviously, the show has had a whole second life on YouTube and other video sharing sites with just sharing clips around and everything. It is a weird beast that I think, especially in that late night context, that like kind of engenders a certain like heavy otaku passion for following shows. This isn't really that kind of show. Like, you could miss several episodes of Nichijou, come back to the next one and be fine, because it's not that kind of show. And that's not generally true, I think, of the kind of shows that would have been having success in this space, where like K-On! Is not like super heavy on plot, but if you missed several episodes of K-On!, you would miss vital character information. You're supposed to be there for all of it. And yeah, Nichijou is, I think you're right, it's probably the right show in the wrong place that found its place later on and clearly has a lot of love in the world.
Yeah, and I'm just so happy it exists. And I'm very happy we finally got to talk about it, because this just show has been one of my favorites for a very long time. And then, so now we get to shift our focus, and next week we get to watch a show that is just completely different, that has absolutely no connection to this at all, other than the fact that it is made by KyoAni and obviously features a lot of the same people. So next week we are going to cover Hyoka, the 2012 show, obviously also made by KyoAni, which is 22 episodes plus one OVA. One thing I will shout out about the OVA is generally I would recommend watching it. I think it's between episodes 11 and 12. So after episode 11, I would generally recommend going and watching the OVA, because that's where it's set in the timeline of the story. Because honestly, if you watch the OVA outside of that context, I don't think it's very meaningful. Whereas if you watch it within that context, it has a bit more meaning to it.
And if you have the DVD or Blu-ray, that's just where it's placed.
Yes.
I don't know about streaming versions where they've put it, but that is just, it's literally just there for you. The Blu-ray tells you, watch it here.
Yes, because it very specifically is set between those two episodes. So if you're watching it outside of the Blu-ray, you can watch the OVA. It's not sort of essential in terms of the main storyline, but it very specifically in terms of character development is set right there. It's kind of weird to watch it afterwards. So I'm very, very excited for that show.
I'm excited for this show because it has an all-star fucking cast. We got
yes.
Nakamura Yuichi. We got Satomi Sato. We got Ai Kayano. We got Daisuke Sakaguchi. We got fucking Big Mom, Mami Koyama. I'm excited. These are like great. I love all of these people.
Yeah, Hyoka, if there's one thing, this is set us up for next week. If there's one thing that Hyoka and Nichijou have in common, it's that there is no other show like these. Nichijou is completely unique in terms of its comedy. Hyoka is completely unique in that it is a mystery show, but there is no other show I've ever seen that is like Hyoka in that respect. And it is a fascinating thing. So I'm very excited. Next week, we will get to dig into Hyoka.